Hello and welcome to the Big League Show. As always, I'm Connor Somerville, joined by Aiden Silliphant. And today, we're joined by the most followed Sport Media 2022 student on Twitter, as we were corrected by Kyle Cushman when we had him on, Patrick Tallon. Patrick, how are you doing today?
I love that intro, the most followed. Thanks for, that's quite an intro, and thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I really appreciate you coming on. Yeah, I was corrected by Kyle when we first had him on, and that was quite funny as we tried to figure out when we could get you on so you could promo our show.
When Kyle did his crunch time, because Rain actually had his account banned, in his crunch time intro, he said, "I'm now the second most followed. Thanks, Rain," in brackets.
Wait,
so it's kind of funny.
He had his account banned?
I guess he went to change his birthday, and I guess he made the account when he was too young, and then it recognized that, so he had to make a new one. He made it like 3 weeks ago. He already has like 500 followers, so he's fine. But he had over 1,000, so now Kyle's up to second most followed. So I just thought that was kind of funny.
Wow,
nice.
That's cool how you have like a little friendly competition going on there.
Yeah.
Sometimes friendly, sometimes a little hostile, but yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
No, I'm just kidding. It's fun. It's fun. Yeah.
Yeah, Twitter can be an interesting place, as we'll potentially get into later, especially in the hockey sphere. But We'll save that for a little bit. Let's sort of dive into you a bit more and sort of understand what your journey has been like, because you've had a bit of an interesting one that's been a bit different than other students we've had on, in that you had an actual broadcasting gig before you came to Ryerson. And why don't we start? I'm starting each show and each sort of section with this new question. We started last week with Matt, and that is, what is your first sports and sport media memory? Yeah, I know. It makes you think a little bit.
So I guess my first sport moment, I don't know if I could narrow it down to a specific moment, but I think it has to be something revolving around hockey, because hockey's just been a huge part of my life, both watching and playing. But I'd have to probably say Saturday night watching hockey games with my dad, or occasionally going to a Montreal Canadiens game, either in Montreal or in Ottawa, and seeing live hockey games. And like, I'm from Kingston, so we'd see the France, and just whenever seeing any hockey game, but I'd probably have to say, like, look back when I was young, like public school, probably rushing home, waiting 4 hours, and then finally watching the game with my dad. I think that'd probably be like my first sport fan memory. As far as sport media memory, I guess it would be, I'm assuming you mean before school, right?
Yeah, before school.
I guess it would be the first article I published. I published for this tiny little Habs blog. It was like I was in grade 10. It was terribly written. It was just a bunch of opinions, and it didn't really make sense. It didn't flow. I didn't have anyone proofread it. But I remember there were like 9 comments, and I posted it on Twitter, and there were 9 replies and a bunch of comments on the website. And I was like, oh my God, Mom, Dad, look at all these people who agree with me and stuff like that. I guess that'd be my first sport media moment. Sometimes I look back at that article and I cringe quite a bit, because I had no idea what I was talking about, but I guess some people seem to agree. So probably those 2 for sure.
I think we're all in a very similar boat in that we cringe at our early work. I'm in that boat as well. I'm sure Aiden is in that boat too.
Our first podcast. If you go back and watch, it's on our YouTube channel. If you want to see how far we've come, just take a look at that.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey from starting, I guess, the winter semester of first year, going into third year now. So let's sort of dive into what sort of got you into sport media. What sort of drew your attention towards the media aspect of sports, and when did you sort of fall in love with the entire media landscape?
So it took me a while to figure out what I wanted to do. And even when I started writing, blogs, and I've been on Twitter since grade 9, so 2014. And from there, I was always like, I just sort of discovered hockey Twitter. It wasn't like an intentional thing. I wasn't always trying to post updates. I wasn't always trying to write. And then it's sort of, this guy noticed I was tweeting, and, I have hockey opinions just like every other hockey fan. And he said, hey, how would you want to write for this site? Just try it. I said, I've never written before. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. He said, no, just try it, right? So I wrote one, and I think my first piece was on Lars Eller. If you see my Twitter, I'm a huge Lars Eller fan. And I wrote that, and I kept doing that, and then people were commenting, and then I started following reporters and then the NHL, CFL, all sorts of leagues. And then I noticed that there's actually a decent bit of interaction between media members and fans. Not a lot, but still a decent amount where if you're respectable enough and you can ask questions and approach them. And then I kept doing that, but I never really knew what I wanted to do for a job. And then in grade 12, I was still unsure. So I took a year off, actually. I don't know if you guys know that. I took a gap year after grade 12. Not because I didn't know, well, partly because I didn't know, but also I wasn't ready financially. And I don't think mentally I would have been ready, like going right from high school right to university. Like for me, I think it was good to take a break, work full time, focus on myself. And from there, that's when I was really able to strengthen my portfolio, like the stuff I did with Queens, which I'm sure we'll get into. But I think I really started to fall in love in grade 12. My high school had a radio program, and actually had like a little radio studio in the high school. And high school was difficult for me in a couple ways. I wasn't the most engaged, I would say, in subjects that I struggled with. And I feel like I look back, like I failed grade 9 math. I'm not really afraid to admit it. Like math was a struggle for me quite a bit. And I was at a very math and science oriented school. And I felt that there was sort of a push and my school, by the way, my high school is right beside Queen's University, and everyone goes to Queen's for science and stuff like that. So I sort of felt a lot of pressure to stay in Kingston from profs or teachers, profs. I sort of felt like a pressure to go to Queen's and take that kind of stuff. And my guidance counselor was saying, why don't you try science? Why don't you try law? And it's like, no, I don't, like that stuff's not for me. And then I was talking with my guidance counselor, and she said, what do you want to do? And I said, I don't know. And she said, well, what do you do now? And I said, well, I write, and like I like talking, and I like doing stuff on air and stuff like that. And she said, okay, well, let's look. So we looked at media studies, and I thought that's a bit too broad. And then I found Ryerson, and I had never heard of Ryerson Sport Media until she handed me that one pamphlet, and I was like, whoa, that sounds amazing. So I think that was sort of it. But it's not like I always knew I wanted to do this. It definitely took a long time. And yeah, that's basically it.
That's really interesting. I didn't know you'd taken a gap year personally.
Yeah. I recommend it for anyone who is unsure, because I had a lot of friends who weren't sure what they wanted to do, but they saw their friends go to Queen's for life science or Western for whatever, and they sort of felt pressure to do that. And then I remember I went back after my first year of university, reading week or Christmas, and they're working, and I'm like, oh, aren't you in school? They're like, no, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just rushed. And it's like, I think a lot of people do that because they're so caught up in the high school aspect of it, they don't actually take the time to know what they want for themselves. So I always recommend it. It helped me financially and mentally. So I would always recommend taking a year off.
So what did you do like during that year off, I guess, to help you prepare mentally, like you said, for the grind of going into a program like sport media? And I guess what else did you do to improve your portfolio resume to help you get into the program?
So that was the year when I got an internship with Queens doing their play-by-play in color. So when that started actually in grade 12 when I was doing the radio program, and when I was looking at schools with the basketball coach there, I talked to him when I said, oh, I want to do sport media. He said, oh, I have a friend. I don't know if you guys know Tom McCabe, who's I think going into 4th year now. He and this guy did volleyball commentary, and I said, oh, I'm really into hockey. He said, okay, well, how about you come with me and you can work alongside me with Queens. I said, oh, that'd be fantastic, right? So that was the main thing. I think that was what made me really fall in love with it. I was so nervous my first 2 games, like listening back, my voice was shaky. I was talking super fast. I was rushing what I was saying. I didn't really take the time, and he was like, no, relax. Like, it's okay. So that's the main thing I did to really strengthen my portfolio. It was usually 2 to 3 games a week. I was usually on color. The odd time, if he wasn't able to do it, I took play-by-play, which is a ton of fun. I feel like I'm better at color, but play-by-play was a ton of fun, and that was a great experience. So that was the main thing I did to strengthen my portfolio. I met some amazing people. I got to see how a broadcast work. Obviously, the stuff at Ryerson we have is unbelievable, because at Queens, it was like I had to crawl up a little ladder, and it was almost like this ledge hanging over, and it was wood, and it was like kind of shaky. So, but it was cool just to have a start in that sort of environment to see. And then with that, I did the occasional hockey podcast, and then I tried to write at least once a month or once every couple months, stay active on Twitter and stuff like that. And then I kept some of my old radio shows that I did at the radio program at my high school.
So what was that like, the radio program being your first introduction to the media landscape that isn't just writing stories, it's more using your voice and articulating what you want to say without the ability to really think through and revise what you wanted to say? What was that experience sort of like for you, and how did that help you with your eventual broadcasting gig?
I think that helped me the most. I always forget about that. I always kind of look back to doing random podcasts here and there, or the work with Queens. I never really think back to radio because it's music, right? So I would have about 3 or 4 shows a week that were about an hour. Within that hour, 7 to 9 minutes had to be talking about sports, news, or weather. Between that, you talk about music. So usually you do 2 songs, 4 songs, and then a break. Where you'd have to talk. And again, same thing with that. Like when I did my first radio broadcast, the radio, it only reaches Kingston. Obviously it's not going to go far. It's a high school radio station, but it's pretty cool because it was run by students, and there was an entire room with a soundboard. So that was another thing, is like I was able to use a soundboard, and that helped me kind of figure audio and being able to record, working with microphones. That kind of gave me a bit more comfort going into sport media, knowing that I had worked with some of these tools before. So obviously, like my first radio broadcast, same thing. I was nervous. I don't know. And like growing up, I had stage fright. Growing up, I did not like to present. Growing up, I did not like to speak in front of the class. I got nervous. I thought people were looking at me, but I knew that I wanted to go into sport media, and I knew that I had, I liked talking, and I knew that I didn't have a choice. And if I didn't do the radio program, if I didn't do the stuff with Queens, I would regret it. And I'd look back thinking, well, you could have done that. Why would you waste it because you're nervous, right? So that helped a lot. And it was cool to take a step away from sports sometimes and talk about music and talk about the news and talk about the weather. And I feel like having done that, talking about that kind of stuff helps me when I'm doing any sort of broadcasting with school, understanding delivery, because we did delivery practices as well. How to breathe and how to sort of talk so your voice is powerful, but you're not rushing and stuff like that. So that helped a ton. And I feel like sometimes I take it for granted and I kind of forget how valuable that experience was for me.
Yeah, it sounds really, really important and a very good asset to have going into sport media and going into your time with Queens. What was that sort of experience like, putting yourself out there with the Queens broadcasts? And how much do you think that helped you in terms of getting into Ryerson and the sport media program?
I think it helped a decent amount. But I also think, well, like I said, at first I was so nervous. Like I barely knew the guy who said, yeah, come down to the Memorial Center where the Fronts used to play, but now the Gales play there. He gave me a press pass and he said, no, you can cut this line. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. All right. I'm a big deal. And then so that was kind of cool. And being up in the press box, and it was kind of the first 2 broadcasts were on, and I'm not trying to sound cliche, but it was honestly surreal because I was up in the one booth that was restricted with this guy, and he was going over the players. He said, watch it for that player. And I was fully immersed in the environment. They were doing the warm-ups. The fans were pretty loud. Like it was a pretty awesome experience. And then the anxiety mixed with that, and the intensity, sort of like, I kind of use it as motivation that is like, hey, this is insane. This is intense. This is fun. This is what I want to do. And I think that definitely helped a lot with how I don't think that was why I got into the program by any means. Like in my interview, I had a lot of questions, and I told my interviewer, so like, there's a lot of stuff I don't know. There's a lot of stuff that I want to learn. Like, I'm not expecting to just do broadcasting in school. Like I want to become a better writer. I want to learn graphics. I want to learn video editing. And I felt that I didn't want to use Queens as like an advantage or anything, because there's still so many things I want to learn, and so many things I don't know how to do, and so many things I struggle with, even at school. So I think it helped, but I don't want to limit it to just that, if that makes sense.
Well, I definitely think that would have helped. And it was an advantage for you, because I don't think, a lot of people had that experience coming into the program. So I guess talking now about like your interview and that whole application process with Ryerson, you said the interview went pretty well, but you also had a lot of questions. Who was your interviewer? How do you think the interview went, I guess? And also, if you can remember the essay question that you had to write before the interview, because that's always intriguing to find out.
Okay, so the interview, I was there first thing in the morning, and my interview wasn't until like 3. So I was sitting in the RCC. I didn't know it was until 3. They said get there early, and I was there early, and then I was just sitting, and I saw all these people, and I was wearing a suit, and other people were wearing suits, and my interviewer was Gwen. I remember asking Ryan Sykes, and she's not there. She hasn't been at the school for basically since we all started first year, but she was my interviewer. She was very nice. I was nervous, but at that point, I'm always more nervous leading up to something, but once I'm doing the interview, I'm fine. But I thought the interview went great. Like, I felt pretty relaxed. She just asked questions about what I did and what I want to learn. I feel like I should remember the interview better than this, but I tried to stay calm, ask questions, be curious, but also confident. Like, I feel like people confuse confidence and they conflate confidence with being cocky and I didn't want to be either of those, but I wanted to show that I still had like ambition and drive to be in the program, and I want to work hard and there's stuff I want to do. But at the same time, like I said before, acknowledge that there's a lot of stuff that I want to work on. There's a lot of stuff that I still struggle with in school. Graphics, for example, like I'm seeing some of the work that people are putting out. Shout out to Reese and Kayla, some of the stuff that they are doing, and it's just unreal. And I've tried to mess around on Photoshop and it looks like awful. Anyway, I feel like I'm sort of sidestepping the question, but no, I thought the interview went pretty well. And as far as the written question, I can't remember what it was. I think it was something about, weren't there 2 questions? There were 2 and you picked one, right?
Yeah.
I think it was about a sport documentary or a sport movie you watched.
Yeah, that sounds right.
I think it was that. And I think I talked about Moneyball, but I honestly don't I feel like I should remember that. It was either Moneyball or The Rocket, and talked about the political aspect of what was happening in the 40s with Maurice Richard and all that stuff, but I don't think I can answer that. I don't really remember. Sorry, guys.
No, it's cool.
It's all good. I should have warned you about this.
That's okay.
Do you remember what day you interviewed?
March
Was
9th.
it the day before March break?
Jesus Christ. How do you guys remember this? Like, you
It
answered that so quickly.
was the weekend. It was a Friday or a Saturday.
So I did speak to you.
The 8th or the 9th. Did I speak to you? I met Maddie Smith was there.
I know I met somebody. I told
might
my
have met
mom
you.
and your mom or someone was talking.
Okay.
And I think we talked after the interview. Or after.
Might have, because I remember I met Maddie Smith. I remember
Okay.
I was talking to her before her interview, and I'm like, "Oh, are you nervous?" And she's like, "Yeah, a little bit." I'm like, "Yeah, me too." And we both have the same interviewer. And I remember asking her how hers went, and then I remember seeing her. I think Frosh, like, "Oh, hey, I met you at the interview." But I remember talking to a couple other people. It was. I think it was March 8th or 9th, or the 13th, maybe. One of those days. I don't know, but I know it was early March. Yeah.
It was.
I hear my mom's talking to someone saying, "Oh, I met this other kid or this kid's mom, and he's doing his interview now," and stuff like that. And
that definitely would have been me, because that was the day before March break.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds about right. Yeah. Cool. Neat.
Huh. That's hilarious. I thought it was you, but I wasn't 100% sure on that.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's sort of ringing a bell now. It's kind of coming back to me. Okay, that makes sense.
I wasn't there.
No, you weren't there.
I was on another. I don't remember the day. I don't know how you remembered that so quickly, like March 9th. Like, I don't remember.
I couldn't have told you the actual date. I just know it was the day before March break, because I went back to school after that for some reason. And my math teacher at the time was watching, it was some movie with like 2 other girls in the class, and everybody else was just hanging out outside of the class. There was no point to me going back.
My interview was March 9th.
Really?
Yeah, it says March 9th. I'm looking on my Snapchat memories.
I have mine. Friday, March 9th, 2018 at 10:30 a.m. I have my ticket here.
Oh,
That's
damn.
hilarious.
My ticket's at 11:12. I took this photo. That's weird.
Huh.
I was in the afternoon. I was late afternoon.
Who interviewed you guys?
I had Donna Morrison.
Okay. I had 2 interviews. So I must have been there when you were there, Patrick, too.
Okay.
Because I had a media production interview at, it says here, 1:00. And then I guess the sport media one was right after.
I remember I met a bunch of media production kids. I think I met more media production kids that day than I did a sport media. So, yeah.
Do they let more media production kids in than sport media?
I think so. I think it's a bigger program.
Yeah, a little bit bigger.
200? 100? I don't know.
Okay, yeah.
But did you guys only... Sorry, go ahead. Did you guys only apply to Ryerson, or did you apply to other schools as well?
I
Other
applied
schools.
to 15 programs.
Wow.
Because my parents wanted me to apply to a lot of places.
Fair.
Although multiple of them I just wasn't going to go there. No
Right.
backups. Like I applied to
Yeah.
Acadia for history
Okay.
because they came to our school and gave acceptances day of.
Right.
So I just got it guaranteed, and I knew I was going to university. But
Okay, fair enough.
yeah, when did you find out you got into Ryerson?
Late, and I was freaking out. Later, because I remember there was a group chat, and I was Snapchatting a couple people and people I met in media production. And they go, yeah, I got in like 2 weeks ago, and I was like, oh my god. And I wasn't sure if I was looking in the right place. And then I don't remember the exact date, but I remember it was later than everyone else because I finally went on the website and it said accepted, and I was at work at like 6 a.m. and I was like, oh my god, finally. And then I waited to tell my parents, and we were in the same room, that I finally got in, because I applied to other schools as well, but those ones were not, like, I got into the other programs I applied to, but they weren't high on my list at all.
Yeah.
Ryerson was the main one, so I was, they knew I got into other programs that I applied to, but they were waiting on Ryerson. It's just funny how all the ones that were last on my list I got into first, and the one that was first on my list I got into last. So yeah.
Huh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
It's funny to see how connected everybody in this program is in ways that we didn't even know. Like I was a part of that Snapchat group chat.
Exactly.
I didn't know Aiden, you interviewed on the same day as both of us.
Yes, I didn't know that either until just now.
And I think Zach interviewed the same day,
Zach,
correct?
Zach did. Yeah, Zach was the only
Maddie.
person I knew at the interview. And
Maddie.
Emil was also there on that day as well.
Emil?
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's like, what, a 10th of our program already?
Yeah, really. That's hilarious. That's crazy. Yeah. Wow.
So we only have like 8-ish minutes left in this call. And we have a ton of stuff we still want to talk to you about. So we'll hit other stuff after that.
Sure.
But I'm going to talk to you quickly about, let's go with the 2 blogs you've written for, and A Winning Habit and All About the Habs. We'll get into the 5th year collective, or the year 5 collective. Why do I keep saying that? The year 5 collective after the break, because we talked to Matt about this last week.
Yep.
What was writing for A Winning Habit like? And what was that sort of experience like for you?
Awesome. So I was actually so there's the very, very first, sorry if I can go back a little bit. The first one was this random Habs one I told you called Rabbit Habs. It was very, very small. And that was just when I was just getting my foot in the door. And from there I met other people, and then other people, the people from All About the Habs said, hey, we love your stuff. How about you write for us? And that became a consistent thing. And that I wrote probably 40, 50 articles for them, some opinions, some just recaps and stuff like that. Did a couple podcasts for them. And then I got to a point where I was handling their social media as well, and their Facebook platform. They have like 30,000 likes. So they said, yeah, here's the socials. You can be in charge of that. So that was kind of cool. And that was sort of a different, it was a step away from just writing and talking. It was cool to kind of do social media, and like, I'd watch the practice online, and they'd say, okay, post the lines. Don't, you have to schedule these posts and stuff like that. So that was kind of cool. And that was something I also thought about doing, was like social media coordinating for certain platforms. So that was another way that they gave me a lot of opportunity and a lot of leeway and freedom to test stuff out. I said, can I do a podcast? They said, sure. I said, can I write this opinion, and can I have this person on? Can I incorporate, a video breakdown and stuff like that? They said, yep, anything you want. The people there gave me a ton of freedom, and they had pretty solid editors. Over time, though, that site kind of lost a lot of writers. Like, I don't know if you guys know Mitch Brown. He writes for The Athletic now. He used to write for them, so we were working together a little bit. But it kind of lost writers over time, and some of the people who were running it had other stuff going on, and it didn't really seem like a consistent spot for written work. And I thought, well, people aren't going to go there for written work, then I think I should probably write for other stuff in places that are consistent. And now it's more of like an update page, and I don't want to write for an update page. I want to write for something that people go to the website. Obviously, Fansided is big. Like, more than half of our program writes for Fansided. It's sort of like SB Nation, where SB Nation has tons of blogs and stuff like that. So that's when I started writing for A Winning Habit, and I felt there was a little bit more structure there, a little bit more I didn't say there wouldn't be a lot of freedom, but there'd be more, like, they told you what they wanted and how they wanted it. But there was also still a little bit of wiggle room where if I wanted to test new things, I'd have to ask them. It was just a bit more structured. So I've only written 3 or 4 pieces for them, but I have a couple drafts in the go right now. But anything like that where I can write and I can reach people on Twitter. I know there were a couple people who would like ask me when my next stuff was out, which was really cool to think, I'm just a 20-year-old or 21-year-old, writing stuff in my basement or in my room, and there are still a few people who were asking for it, and so it's fun. Writing anywhere is fun. I like to see. It's cool to see your name online and to see people commenting, to see people saying, "Oh, this sucks. I hate you." Like, it's still kind of cool. It's like, hey, this guy hates something I did. Like, that's kind of awesome. Or like, this is great. To keep up the good work and stuff like that. So, I love writing. Sometimes I find like I have bits and pieces of time where it's like it's hard. And like, for example, the past 2 months I have done very little work, but then the last week I have written a couple things. So I find writing hard, and I feel like it's hard to do it consistently. And the people that actually do that for The Athletic, who write stuff every single day, sometimes 2 pieces every single day, like Bruce Arthur came to our class and he was telling us like hundreds and hundreds, and it's like, that's hard. That's a grind. That is something that not a lot of people can do. But I love writing, and hopefully I can get better at it over time.
Yeah, it's something that's very useful, even with not affiliated to, if you want to write in public and write articles. It's like even writing emails, it's helpful.
Yeah.
Let's sort of wrap up this little portion before we dive into everything else after the little break. With your work with All About the Habs, what was that sort of like, and how did that sort of come about? Because you started working for them back in like 2015.
Yeah, you've done your homework.
Yeah.
Like I said, like the Rabid Habs blog I wrote for, like I felt that when I was writing stuff for them, I felt that I was starting to get better at writing, and I felt that I had a lot to say, and I felt that I don't say like my voice heard, because that sounds kind of like cliche, but like there was stuff that I wanted people to see, and I wanted to reach a decent audience, because I saw that there were tons of people my age also on Twitter who were posting articles saying, hey, check out this piece I did, hey, check this out. And I wanted to reach those people as well. So I messaged them, and they said, yeah, we read your stuff. Like, by all means, you can start here. And then that's sort of how it started. And from there, I noticed that's kind of when I got more followers. That's when I was engaged more on Twitter. That's when I started interacting with people, tried to interact with people in the media, I wasn't trying to be a media figure, but I would ask them questions. I would think of, I know Gord Miller once in a while does like a Ask Me Anything, and I was like, what's it like in the dressing room? What's it like here? And I think the coolest thing that I got to do was when I went to a Canadiens game, and then actually met one of the contributors to All About the Habs after, and we had a beer, and it was kind of cool to talk to him, and he was handling the social medias. And look, All About the Habs is not it's not like a big thing, but it's just kind of cool to meet other people who are doing that, who take their work just as seriously. But it's led to some pretty cool opportunities. Obviously, following The Athletic when they started, I went to Concordia, one of the Concordia buildings in Montreal, and I saw Arpon Basu of The Athletic interview Jonah Carey, who wrote Up, Up and Away about the Expos. And they interviewed, and I got this ticket. My dad got me a ticket. He said, here, I'm going to send you to Montreal, go to Concordia, listen to them speak, listen to them talk about media, listen to them talk about sports culture. And it was cool to see 2 media members just sit across from each other, talk about baseball, talk about hockey, talk about media landscape, talk about life in media. And I was able to talk to Arpon Basu for a long time. I said, this is what I'm doing. I asked for advice. And seeing a media member, I don't know, it's like, I know it's different for other people, and I'm sure people who aren't in sport media, if they just saw a reporter, they wouldn't care. But for me, it's like, okay, this guy's a big deal. This guy is a media member. And, writing for other places at the time, it's like, I want to do that. I want to be that later on. So at that point, I tried to write more and more and more for All About the Habs, and then write for other sites as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, I found a lot of people in the media tend to be very nice. I've spoken about this in the past with Rachel Dory, Ian Telek. Gord Miller's daughter actually went to my high school, so I got to meet him a few times, and he's a very, very nice person.
Yeah.
We are basically at a time on this call, so we'll jump into another call immediately after this. But yeah, after the break, we will talk about all the stuff you're still doing, whether it be the radio show you've started, writing for the Eye Opener, all your prospect work, things like that. So we'll be right back to talk all about Patrick Tallon.
Awesome.
And we are back after that little break. To you, it's like a minute. To us, it's like 20 maybe, because we have a tendency to talk before we start recording again. But let's dive into some of your other work that you're still doing right now, because with Fansided, there's been a bit of a gap, as well as All About the Habs, and you're starting a few things that I want to get into in a second, but let's start off with the Year 5 Collective, because we talked with Matt Mallard about this last week because he was also a member of it. You were a founding member along with Ella Benaldi, Luke Burrows, Kyle Cushman, Ivan Ellis, Nigel Gubekjian. I hope I said that right.
I don't even know how to say his last name. It's okay.
And you live with them, so okay.
Yeah. I live with Kyle and Drew.
Oh, you live with Kyle and Drew. Okay.
Yes, Matt lived with Nigel and Luke. Now Matt just lives with Luke.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah.
So you've moved back to Toronto then?
Yes, I was. Yeah, I when the pandemic started, I moved. I went back to Kingston like early March, stayed there, and then we got a new place. We're all settled, but back in Toronto now.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Other members. No, it was me. Other members that were founding: Drew Hardiman, Rain Hernandez, Simon Kischuk, Nicholas Robinson, Elizabeth Rositsan, and obviously Matt Mallard. What was that experience like, and where do you see this going in the future? Because we asked the same question to Matt, and I'm interested to hear your answer.
I don't see myself putting anything up there, not in like a rude way, but I think that was a good start, and I think a couple of things happened. Look, I think a lot of our friend group, and then just in the program in general, we're always talking about sports. We're always talking about sports in class, and I think we just had a lot to say, and we thought it'd be sort of a good student initiative to start a website, put our work there, but also like we had subsections where we would post all of our Spirit Live shows under a little on-air section and stuff like that, and we were trying to sort of make it as loose as possible, and have some stuff that's maybe a little bit more not vulgar, uncensored, but just stuff that's a little more relaxed and stuff like that. I wrote a couple pieces there, but I think it was better for some people who didn't necessarily have an outlet at the time to put work. I didn't mind writing a couple pieces, but I mean, I can get a higher reach and share it with people on websites that that's a little bit more active. And I'm not trying to say this in like a rude way. I don't know how many people were viewing the site, with the exception of ourselves and whoever was sharing it on Twitter. And for me, I know I can't really see myself writing for that anytime soon. I want to put my stuff up on bigger platforms. I also think we burnt out really quick. I think we were so excited. We threw article after article after article, and then some people started writing for new places. I know Ella's doing stuff. Elizabeth's doing stuff. Kyle writes for Editor and Leaf. I started writing for different sites as well. So I think once we sort of all kind of went on different platforms, we didn't really feel the need to write there. And obviously, like, it's still up and anyone is open to writing for it.
Yeah, it's a good looking website.
Yeah, I credit to Luke. Luke really, Luke did an excellent job at that. He was sort of in charge of making the website. We made like a schedule, and it was fun at the start, and it was a good idea. And I'm proud of the work we did, obviously, but I think it was just a mix of people got different platforms. Like I said, Elizabeth's writing for Barn Burner. Ella's doing stuff. Oh, I forget the network.
It is the Sport Management, or SPMA.
Yeah. Okay. SPMA. I couldn't remember the acronym.
They follow everyone on Twitter.
Okay. Yeah. Nick got his stuff with the Sens, and we all went off different platforms, and I think it sort of happened organically. I don't think it was like we decided to stop. I think it was a mix of both. So.
Yeah, it was a good, I think, founding spot for you to really get an idea and sort of create more relationships, professional relationships with people in our program.
Yeah. And we were always open to expand and like adding everyone from the program, like anyone wants to write, sort of have like, we're the 5th year of sport media, and we're kind of coming together to write this thing. And like, if it ever got to a point where we had a bunch of people in the program writing for that, that'd be fantastic. But I think, everyone's writing for different stuff now. And I don't want to say that this is illegitimate, but, platforms that are verified, like Fansided is verified. Barn Burner is verified. There are tons of websites, Rain's doing stuff for McKean's Hockey, which is an unbelievable achievement and stuff like that. And I just felt that there wasn't really room for people to put stuff up there.
Yeah, it would almost be cool to like create an Instagram or a Twitter where we sort of compile everybody's work in sort of one spot. That might be interesting. Like we create the Year 5 Collective Instagram account.
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody has access to it, and you can just put your stuff there. That might be interesting.
That's a good idea.
let's talk about that afterwards.
Yeah, sounds good.
Second idea that's come out of this podcast, which we'll dive into how that's sort of expanded with our interview with Kyle Watson in a little bit. But let's talk about a bit more around your work with the Eye Opener. Obviously, you've written, I saw at least one article.
Yes.
I didn't actually click on the Eye Opener's page because I was doing this research a little late at night last night. But what has that experience been like for you, writing for a school newspaper and covering actual university sports and having sort of a stricter, I guess, guideline to what you write about, while also having the freedom to cover the people who you know?
That was cool. That was an unbelievable experience. That was one of the more fun experience, because a lot of the times the stuff I write for, I'm writing because I'm watching stuff on TV or watching YouTube videos. But this was cool because I was friends with Natasha pretty quickly. In first year, we lived on the same floor actually in Pittman, and we were talking about fencing, and she's very passionate about fencing. And then I remember I don't remember who was in charge of the Eye at the time, but I just said like, hey, can I write about fencing? And he said, why? And I said, well, no one knows about it. It's a pretty niche sport. And I feel like it's pretty intense. If you think about it, fencing is intense, and no one really seems to notice that. It's like, oh, it's just fencing. It's like, no, that's like, you're hitting someone with a sword. Like, that's kind of a big deal. So I remember I asked, I don't remember who it was. I'm really upset I'm blanking on the name, but I just, yeah, I'd love to do a piece on fencing. And I had a sit down interview with Natasha just in our Pittman. So I just had the recording. I just asked her a bunch of questions, and she was a fantastic interviewer and gave plenty of thoughtful answers. And then there was the fencing, I don't want to get the name wrong, but it was one of the final tournaments for fencing at U of T. And I remember I went there, and it's this, I don't know if you guys have been to U of T where they have like the indoor track. Yeah. That building is massive.
That's and then where I had track practices there for high school.
Okay,
because
cool.
Our school didn't have a track or a field.
Nice. So they basically just had that entire thing with all the different fencing platforms, and I look around and people are screaming and like yelling at each other, and there's all these like I don't want to say sword fights, but like all this stuff is happening, and it's really, really cool to watch. And then I got a press pass. I think it's hanging right there, but I got like a fencing thing, and I was like, okay. She said, yeah, so walk around, you can interview anyone and take pictures and stuff like that. So I got to take pictures of the trophies. I got to learn more about fencing and how it worked and meet some of the people. And that was really cool because that was one of my first experiences actually going to an event, writing at the event that I'm going to be there, and talking to people and sort of doing something a little bit more remote. Whereas anything else I've ever written was always just from what I've seen on TV or talking about the news, and it was always in a different city. But this was cool because they said at the Eye Opener, they said, just, yeah, go watch the fencing thing, talk to the coach, talk to whoever. And obviously we got the experience of doing that this year when we had in Dan's class.
Sport journalism.
Sport journalism. That was really cool. And to kind of get the actual experience of actually asking the questions. And so that was really cool. And I had a lot of fun doing that.
Yeah, it sounds like a really interesting opportunity. In what were you going to say?
Is that something that you think you're going to continue doing when like U Sports do return, like writing for Eye Opener, doing stuff like that?
Yeah, I'm always open to writing more, and I think that's definitely something that I regret first and second year. If I can be honest, is not writing enough. Like I feel I enjoy writing, and like I said, I'm always happy to see my name on something and being able to share work. And I feel like I probably could have done more of that. So, this year, whatever happens with sports, or not even just sports, like I'm interested in other stuff, like social issues, political issues, stuff like that. Like I'm open to writing, and I think I definitely want to expand in that, and probably contact the Eye Opener and write a little bit more. So that's definitely something I'm interested in.
Yeah, it's a very cool opportunity to be able to write for the Eye Opener, and I believe it's completely student run. That's sort of connecting you with a lot of other, whether it be journalism or media production or whoever students, and taking that advantage of that sort of situation. And fencing is quite entertaining. It's like ping pong. I love watching ping pong because the stuff that they do in ping pong is insane. I don't know if you've ever watched it, but it looks like a video game.
I've seen it like on like videos of like people who are professionals, and it's pretty remarkable. Yeah, it's
crazy. I watched it. I think it was on a trip during like the Summer Olympics or something, and it was on some little tiny TV, and I genuinely thought it was like a replay of a video game.
Yeah,
because
sick.
it was that quick.
I think I actually went to a ping pong game. I think for the
Really?
the Pan Am Olympics that were in
Okay.
Toronto, like I don't know how many years ago. But yeah, I went to see like a couple games, and it was actually really cool, like seeing it up close and personal. Like it's really insane what goes on. And I got a ping pong table right over there. I always play.
Yeah, I got a table right over there as well. And ping pong, underrated sport, I have to say. It's
Yes.
Same with fencing. What was sort of that experience like in terms of learning a sport, I guess, while you're writing a story? What was that sort of like?
It wasn't. I wouldn't say it was difficult. It was just new, and it's like, okay, I have all this information now. I have to sort of put that in there, and that's sort of how I frame the article around that. Is I don't know a lot about fencing. I'm assuming most of the people don't know a lot about fencing.
Yeah.
So the angle I took with the article was, fencing is a niche sport that deserves recognition, and then I used Natasha's quotes to explain fencing, the mental aspect, the physical aspect, the psychological aspect of doing that, the stress and the pressure, and all of that. So I kind of used her quotes and how, a lot of her quotes were saying stuff like, well, people don't really know this, or did you know that it's actually this? And here's how the rules work. So I kind of framed the article that way. So it wasn't like I was explaining fencing. It wasn't like a fencing breakdown. It was more, if you don't know about fencing, it's a really amazing sport. Take it from a fencer who can explain the challenges and stuff like that. So that's sort of how I frame. I think that helped a little bit. I wasn't trying to get the edge like that. I wasn't getting her to explain it because I didn't know it. I just thought that a lot of people don't know it, and I felt like that was the best way to go about it. And if there's one way to learn more about fencing, it shouldn't be from someone like me. It should be from someone who actually does it, who can speak about her actual experiences doing it.
I think also having that sort of perspective in that you don't really know what the sport is really helpful because it portrays you learning at the same time to the audience. And that's something I find very interesting in terms of understanding sports, is having somebody who doesn't necessarily know a lot about it ask questions that somebody who doesn't know a lot about the sport is able to tell people about. And obviously you were able to do that with the fencing, which I think is really interesting. And yeah, is there anything else you sort of have learned from the eye-opener experience?
The demands are a lot higher, I think. They have a standard that I guess I'd say I wasn't really expecting. Like for all the articles I've written, when people edit stuff, it's like, oh, you could change this, but it's up to you. Like I remember I wrote it and I went over it like 20 times, and then he sent me the doc and said, okay, I need you to change anything that's highlighted. And like 50% of it was highlighted. And I was like, oh my God, okay. And then I kind of felt not embarrassed, but like, man, what if they don't think it's good enough and all that stuff. So that I like that. I like sort of the pressure. And that kind of helps me, for anything that I do in the future to revise it more and more and more and more, instead of revising it 10 times, look over it another 10. So that was the one thing I really noticed is like the standard they have, the deadlines it's a bit more like they say have it done in 2 days, right? Whereas, a lot of the other sites that people write for and that I've written for, it's a little bit more loose. It's usually like, okay, yeah, try and get it done this week. Try and get it done. Where with them it was like, get it done in 2 days. Here's all the edits you need to change. So that was pretty cool. And that was a good, I don't want to say wake up call, but that was a good jolt to the system, I guess. And it helped me say, okay, I have to do this. I don't have a choice. The deadline's 2 days. I have all these changes to make. I better do it. So I think that was definitely the coolest part of it.
It's really interesting. We haven't had anyone on, I think, who's done a lot of work with the eye opener.
Just wait till you have rain.
Yeah, wait until we have rain. Yeah. He's definitely, I guess, we want to get on in the future. We might maybe wait for your next project to start. Maybe that's when we'll have him on, so we can get into a bit more on that. Because we do try to schedule out who we have on and when. Because we do want to have, as we're going to talk about in a second, Therese. We want her on pretty soon because she's done some very, very good graphics, and I believe you mentioned her earlier in terms of the graphics that she's done. So yeah, she's a guest we're hoping to have on eventually. But let's talk about your work with Spirit Life and your other radio work, because this is sort of a second project you started. I believe it was the second semester of first year, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you started Take to Take with Luke Burrows and Nick Robinson. What has that experience been like for you, and what have you sort of taken away from working with those two guys?
It's been, a lot has changed. We've definitely like changed the format of the show. We've definitely developed a lot more chemistry over the years. Listening back to old shows, listening back to our delivery. But it's been fun. They're both unbelievably and talented people. We're all the three of us are very opinionated, especially about hockey. And that's sort of how we framed it, because, obviously everyone does sports shows, but we sort of, we're three people in Toronto who don't cheer for the Leafs, we all cheer for different teams. Obviously Luke being Vancouver, Nick being Ottawa, myself being Montreal. So we sort of framed it around that, how we can sort of observe the situation within Toronto from an outsider's perspective, but also share our thoughts because we're all coming from different places. And none of us are from Toronto either. So that was pretty cool. But it's been great. We've changed a lot. I remember at first Nick was the host, and then Luke was the host. And then this year I'm the host, and I think I'll probably be the host for the remainder of it, just to try new stuff. Like we changed who worked the board. We changed who handled the streaming. We changed who uploaded the stuff, if we were going to do YouTube or if we were going to do Spotify. But overall, it's been a fantastic experience working with them. It's a lot of fun. We've had some very heated debates, which is sort of the point of the show. It's like, it's all of our different takes, and let's talk about it, and let's only sort of make it about this. Nick and I have had, I don't even know how many debates, obviously like thoughtful and civil debates about fighting in hockey, about analytics versus the eye test and stuff like that. And it's really been, we've made a conscious effort to not just recap what happened in sports, but talk about, sort of what's at the center of hockey debates and what's so divisive about hockey, and even like social issues like hockey culture, Mike Milbury's comments, the Garrett Taylor, Dan Carcillo class action lawsuit that happened, stuff like that. We tried to sort of step away from the mainstream general recap and talk more about contentious issues that obviously we all have opinions on. So it's been a fantastic experience working with them.
It's really interesting.
You guys are starting that back up again now, right? I saw like on your Instagram you started something, and is that going to be on Spotify now?
Yeah, so we've been doing that inconsistently since the pandemic started. Obviously, we had a quarantine edition of Take the Take where we were all, in our basements and stuff like that. So we've been trying to do it at least once every 2 weeks, if not at least once a month. Obviously, Luke was back and forth moving, and he's working, and Nick was back and forth, and I was back and forth from Toronto, so we couldn't really set a specific schedule. But now with playoffs and everything starting back up, and also there was a period of time when like nothing was happening, so we tried to have as many episodes as possible. I think we played 12 or 15 since the whole pandemic started, and we did one. Nick and I did one 3 days ago, and we're just trying to stay more consistent with it. And I find we all kind of agree that, during the pandemic, it's best to stay busy, keep your mind active, stay productive. And we're definitely going to continue that. That's the one thing that we've changed is, we had all this stuff. Like we had Rain on the show, and we talked about prospects. We talked about his work. We have some guests coming up, one or two maybe from The Athletic that we're actually trying to get on. I know Nick knows someone there. I know someone who writes for EP, Elite Prospects, and he did work for The Athletic. So we're trying to get more guests on. But before we're doing that, that's why you mentioned our Instagram page that we talked about. So we have to market our show. Like if we're going to have these people on, if we're going to have it so consistently, we can't just share it on our Twitter feed. We're going to actually need to market it so people can actually reach it. People can look up the hashtag hockey or hashtag opinion or hashtag sports and see that come up, because, we can only reach so many people, even if we're just posting it on our Twitter feed. So that's something we've been looking to change. And hopefully with school underway, we'll be able to do that more consistently. Yeah,
and you've started another project with prospect work. So what has that sort of been like in terms of doing more stuff for scouting? I know you're mostly OHL, I believe, in terms of that website. You've done one preview on Jan Misek, I believe is how you say his name.
Yep.
What was that experience like, and where do you sort of see this going in the future for you?
So this was my involvement with prospects is relatively recent, actually. I had a buddy on Twitter. He said, "Hey, we're going to do a hockey Twitter mock draft. We're going to get someone to do graphics. We're going to get people in this group chat. I think there's 30 people, 20 to 30 people in this group chat. We made a spreadsheet and stuff like that. And look, I don't consider myself a prospect expert. I think I know a bit about prospects. I'm not not that prospect savvy compared to someone like Rain or Kyle Watson, but that helped. I started following prospects a couple years ago. So I was in that group chat, and then one of the guys said, hey, I'm looking to start a site with people who are interested in prospects. You don't have to know too much about prospects, but if you can write and you understand the general area of prospects, the OHL, SHL, DEL, whatever league you think you could help us, then by all means. So I asked him, I said, hey, like I'd love to try it. And he said, okay. So I was able to watch some tapes on Jan Mysak, I think is how you say it. And obviously I watched him at the World Juniors. We partnered with, another cool thing that happened was we partnered with a video analysis company called Instat. So basically what it is you can look up any player. They have it for hockey and football, but you can look up any player and you can find, I kid you not, anything they've done on the ice. You can look up zone entries, zone exits at 5-on-5, on the left side of the face-off dot, on the right side, goals scored when there's two forwards in the offensive zone, or when there's one forward, or when you're down, all like the most detailed breakdown you could ever find. And we actually partnered with them, and they've partnered with Dauber and a couple other websites. So that's been really cool, and that's helped a lot. And it sort of helped me grow as someone who's interested in prospects, as now I can find literally any information about a player, and all the videos are broken down for me. So that's been really cool. And I'm happy I said yes to that, because I wouldn't have learned as much as I did about young prospects and using certain tools like Instat. So it's been a wonderful experience for sure.
And sort of something new that you've tried to do. And you mentioned you haven't done prospects before, and this is, I guess, sort of been your first entry into the whole prospect world. So what's sort of different in terms of studying and writing about prospects instead of the NHL and Montreal?
Well, I started following prospects probably in 2018. I followed the draft a lot, and I loosely followed it that year, followed it more last year with the Capo Caco and Jack Hughes draft. And then this year, obviously being in the draft chat, they're talking with these players. And it's like, hey, I'm going to watch them. I purchased Hockey TV, so I had access to USHL. Obviously Instat, I can check out any league I want, any player I want. So it's cool, but look, I don't consider myself a scout. I don't consider myself like a prospect expert by any means, but I think I know a decent amount. And it's hard. Prospect, like, it's so unbelievably difficult to judge a player and look at their play for an OHL team. There's so many other factors that you have to look at. You have to look at league comparison. Certain leagues are more difficult than others. You have to look at who they're playing with. So, for example, I'm writing a piece on Martin Chromiak right now, who plays for the Kingston Frontenacs, and he was playing alongside Shane Wright. And obviously Shane Wright's the next first overall pick in 2022. And I have to factor in, okay, well, is this kid good because he's playing with Shane Wright? Is he good because he can drive offense on his own, and stuff like that? So that's what's more difficult, is because, like, even the best NHL scouts get a pick wrong. They get players wrong. You look at every single draft year, someone who was drafted in the top 5, there's going to be someone from 5 to 10 or even 5 to 15 who was unanimous at a later part of the draft, who knocked that player out of the park. And some players translate weird, and that's been hard. And it's hard that's why prospect work, like, some people on Twitter who have like bold takes and they're really absolute about it, they get criticized a lot because it's like, well, you said this player would be 20 goal scorer and now he didn't even make the NHL. It's like prospects are hard, and you have to be careful, and you have to really do your research. That's why I don't consider myself an expert by any means, because I've definitely been wrong about certain players in other leagues. And I'm just trying to learn as much as I can. And obviously someone like Rain, who's a good friend of mine, who's actually a scout for the Oakville Blades, I ask him a ton of questions. Kyle Watson, and we'll get into my work with those two, writing with the London Knights. Surrounding yourself with good people, and also, like, I think with prospect work, I think on Twitter, prospect Twitter is a little bit of a popularity contest in certain ways, where a lot of people kind of want to be the guy. And I think, hockey Twitter is a mess already. Prospect Twitter, I don't find a very supportive group. And I feel like some people just lose sight the fact that some people can think differently. Someone might think that Quinton Byfield is a first overall pick. And sometimes I see the response on Twitter, and it tends to be very negative. But all in all, I'm just doing my best to learn. So that was a very long answer, but Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the Oakville Blades. So could you talk to us a bit about what you've done with them and sort of what you plan to do with them in the future?
So earlier this year, obviously Rain does graphics for them. He's a scout for them, and he does social media for them. Rain and I have been friends since first year, actually, like the first week of first year, and we talked about work we did. We bonded over our fondness of hockey, and I told him about the stuff I did with Queens, and when we were both sort of getting more active within the industry and promoting more of our work. I remember when the Oakville Blades commentators, they were taking a break. They had to take a certain weekend off, and Rain, who had already developed a good relationship with them, with the people, the management there, he said, well, I know a guy who did stuff for Queens, and I've done stuff for Ryerson, like Rain did color and stuff like that. He said, how about, can we just not chime in, but can we join while they're away, and you guys can see how we do, and I'm confident that we can do a good job. So that was my first sort of experience to the Oakville Blades. I met the team, I met the coach. Jamie Storr is the head coach. I don't know if you guys know, he played for the LA Kings and was also, he won gold with Canada, Team Canada, World Juniors. I don't know if it was gold, but he was the goalie. And I met some fantastic people. The player is really cool. So my initial exposure to it was really cool. They play, I don't know if you guys have been to the 16 Mile Sports Complex in Oakville.
Oh, yeah.
So cool. That arena, like, there's nothing like that in Kingston, obviously except for where the France play, but it was really cool. And I met the guy who was handling all the audio, and Rain and I practiced, and it was cool exposure to do something for junior hockey. So there was a game Friday and Saturday. The Friday game I did play-by-play, Rain did color, and then we switched the Saturday. He did play-by-play, I did color. So a ton of fun. I love doing stuff like that. And
what do you, quickly, because we only have 5 minutes left in the call,
that's fine.
What are you sort of planning on doing with them in the future?
So that's a good question, because I know I'm going to be writing for them. That's set in stone. We arranged that with the Oakville Blades. I think I'm going to be doing like a monthly sort of, not a monthly recap, but a monthly journal, sort of recapping some of the best and worst moments of them, talking about players who did well, doing certain interviews with certain players and stuff like that. That's a little bit up in the air. I will be contributing with them. That's set in stone, but how I'll be going about it, what sort of writing it'll be, that's still what I'm unsure about. But I do know it'll mostly be monthly or at least bi-weekly, talking about players that did well, certain milestones. Obviously, they had this player last year, Harrison Israels, who had boatload of points. Like, he was a 3-point per game player. Like, he was playing unreal. So stuff like that, sort of give the players more exposure, and obviously share them on Twitter and stuff like that.
All right. And I guess we could quickly fit this in, just to sort of wrap up your chat so we can dive into the sports in the next call.
Sure.
You're starting a new podcast called In the System with, as you mentioned, Rain Hernandez and Kyle Watson, who we proposed this idea, I think, back on Kyle Watson's show, and this has sort of developed into what this is now. And I'm really excited. I'll be audio producing for them. But how did that really come about behind the scenes, as opposed to just the idea? And what are you planning to do with the show?
I think it kind of happened because Rain, Kyle, and I all started kind of doing prospect stuff around the same time. Obviously, my work for recruit scouting happened around the same time Rain got picked up by McKean's, and Kyle Watson was a bit more involved with the London Knights, and we all sort of started doing stuff at the same time. So we were in a group chat, and we said, hey, what do you think of Ville Heinola? What do you think of Emile Andre, certain players in this year's draft, talking about it? And then Kyle said, hey, let's do a show. And I said, okay, I could see that being a possibility. And they said, okay, well, let's record next week. We're like, well, let's figure out what we're going to do. I sometimes think that, myself included, we jump the gun and we get super excited. And I said, well, hang on, let's make social media. Let's get a logo. Let's get the platform going. Let's figure out the angle we want to take before we jump into anything. And obviously, we figured it out. Obviously, Therese made our logo and cover photo on Twitter. Shout out Therese Part 2 because her graphics are unbelievable. So we wanted to get a logo set up. We wanted to make sure we wanted to know how we were going to market it. We wanted to know that we're going to put it on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and stuff like that. So we are supposed to be recording next week. And I think the angle we're going for, like I said before, I don't consider myself a prospect expert. I have opinions on certain prospects, of course, but I'm going to be hosting. And I think the first episode is generally just going to talk about Lafreniere, Quinton Byfield, the New York Rangers getting the first overall pick, what that means. Maybe do a mock draft for the top 5, maybe the top 10, get a look at certain teams' needs and stuff like that. And once that first episode is done, once we sort of get our feet wet a little bit, we'll expand and decide how we want to go about it. But I'm excited for that because it's nice to step away from the NHL and other sports and talk about prospects you can talk about endlessly because you can look at players who are 16, someone like Shane Wright, you can talk about players like that. So I'm really excited to work with them and work with you as well, obviously being the audio producer.
Yeah, I'm really excited to join this as well. And anytime that somebody in our program starts a podcast, I'm happy because it's them getting their work out there, and we want to get their stories out here on this podcast, which with you in this discussion, this has probably been the longest sort of chat we've had about one person and sort of the stuff they've done, because you have done a lot and you've created quite a following around what you are doing. So we're really happy that you came on. And
yeah, of course.
we want to get your sports takes in a second because there was a certain trade that we want to know about prospects. And
of course,
obviously you don't really know soccer or baseball or basketball or anything like that. So it will be fun to watch you sort of squirm as we talk about Lionel Messi and things like that. But yeah,
good.
Take a quick little break. We'll be right back to talk basketball and the Raptors situation, the Blue Jays making a trade, and the messy situation in Barcelona right now. So we'll be right back. All right. And we are back to actually talk sports after probably our longest discussion about a single person in our little show time, because Patrick is a very good storyteller and he has done a lot. So there was a lot to cover. But I mentioned at the very end basketball, and I think we should dive into that sort of league and the situation going on there first, because this is developing at the same time and could have a lot of ramifications for the potential restart and what could happen in the league. So we'll start with recapping the Raptors Nets series. There isn't really much to say, to be honest. Brooklyn, they weren't good because they didn't have the 3 best players, and Joe Harris had to leave halfway through the series. So they really didn't stand a chance. And the last game was insane because I don't know if you guys saw, but the Raptors put up exactly 150 points and the bench had 100 of those, which was like an NBA record. So Raptors bench, Norm Powell and Serge Ibaka showing up, having a really good playoff so far. Lowry did get hurt in that 4th game. He sprained an ankle and is unsure about his status for tomorrow's game if it happens. I say if it happens because the Boston Celtics and the Toronto Raptors are currently talking about potentially boycotting the game because of the police shooting of Jacob Blake. If you didn't see the video, if you haven't heard because you're living under a rock, Jacob Blake was shot 7 times unarmed, shot 7 times in the back as he was getting into his car with his kids in the car by a police officer. He is believed to be paralyzed from the waist down, and it has sparked dozens of protests all around the U.S., and the Toronto Raptors and Boston Celtics are now having conversations about potentially boycotting tomorrow's game and maybe longer to try to get some actual justice and some actual action, because that's really why they went to the bubble. Is they were unsure about it impacting the Black Lives Matter movement, and now it's sort of developed into a situation where they haven't really seen any change, and that they're hoping is going to change if they potentially do a boycott, which they had a meeting yesterday discussing it, both teams together, and they're having another meeting tonight about whether they're going to boycott anything. And some guys may even leave the bubble. It's sort of, a lot of the situation is up in the air. What do you guys sort of think about this whole situation, and where do you sort of stand on the boycott and everything that's currently going on?
I mean, I think I'd be all for it. I think, it's really not up to what we think, though. It's what the players think, and we're going to support the players. I think, Nick Nurse was on Tib and Sid yesterday saying that, him and the Toronto Raptors, Masai Ujiri, MLSC, they support all the players if they do choose to boycott the game or they choose to just opt out of the tournament as a whole. So, I think in the time that we're living in right now, going back to a few months ago with George Floyd and now, what happened with Jacob Blake this past week, it's bigger than sports. And that's really the thing is, like, the reason why the Raptors went and were okay with playing basketball was because, the NBA did take this seriously and, supporting Black Lives Matter and having the names on the jerseys and stuff. And the Raptors and other NBA players were hopeful that that would spark some change. But as of right now, it just hasn't, happened. And it seems to have gotten worse potentially as well. So I completely understand why some players would want to stop playing, and because, there has to be change. And
sorry, not to cut you off. From Adrian Wojnarowski, the Milwaukee Bucks still haven't come out to the court for Game 6 with the Orlando Magic. And there's been some discussion within the Bucks about a boycott. Sources tell Malika Andrews and him. NBA officials have gone into the Milwaukee locker room.
There you go.
The Bucks might be boycotting Game 6.
That's happening. Yeah.
I love it. I think it's fantastic. I think it was Kyrie who said it was a distraction from the get-go. Mm-hmm. I think this is wonderful. I think it puts things into perspective. BLM, the pandemic, everything that's going on. To put the sole focus on athletes playing basketball, I don't think is unfair. I think they've done what they can by kneeling and obviously having the Black Lives Matter on their jerseys, but I think there's always more they can do. And I think this shows that, following the Jacob Blake and everything, that there's going to be some actual change. There's going to be some actual fighting for it. And that's why, someone like Colin Kaepernick was criticized before. It's okay, he's kneeling at a stadium, but what is he doing to actually help the communities? Is he doing anything significant to help, these communities and these people who are seriously affected by racism, by police officers who are pretty nasty? And I think this is good. I think it's a step in the right direction. Obviously, we like to see people kneeling. We like to see symbolic gestures and stuff like that. But I think to actually see a boycott would sort of wake people up and show that people are starting to take it really seriously. And what was almost denied, what is for some reason still denied, especially in the States by people on the far right, is something that doesn't exist when it clearly does exist, and that is systemic racism, that is police brutality, that is minorities being treated differently, and I think seeing this is a fantastic thing. And we kind of saw it with Tuukka Rask when he decided to go home. People are upset with Tuukka Rask. It's like, look, the pandemic has led to depression rates getting higher, suicide rates going up, productivity going down, and people want to be with their families. People want to be safe. People want to, have a sense of community and a sense of environment that is positive and healthy. And with all this stuff going on, getting upset for people for not playing basketball or going home, I think it shows how some people are blind to what's happening and sort of deflecting. Maybe not deflecting, but it just kind of shows that they're not really paying attention to the root issue here, and that is that there is an issue in the States and in Canada, and there are issues around the world that are of more importance than playing basketball right now. So I think it's a fantastic thing.
And Shams Charania just tweeted, Milwaukee and NBA personnel are standing outside of Bucks' locker room, where players have been adamant about sitting Game 5 in protest. Sources tell me and Joe Varden, I believe it is, at Joe Varden. So this might be our first boycott. It's good to see the Bikes doing this. I'm happy that they're actually pushing for some serious change. And I know the NBA has been probably the most forward-thinking organization when it comes to this movement. Really? But again, they want more. And with it being Milwaukee, I think this is huge because of where this shooting, I believe, was the shooting was in Wisconsin, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then the George Floyd situation was in Milwaukee, if I remember correctly.
I don't know about that.
Or was it? No, it was Minnesota.
Minneapolis, yeah.
Minnesota, yeah. So the Bucks are taking a stance either way, and I think that's always a good thing. I fully support it. I think a lot of people fully support it, and it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out over our show. I'll be following it on Twitter, and if we get any more updates, I'll let you know. They just tweeted out a picture. Adrian Wojnarowski just retweeted it, so let me look at it.
That's crazy.
Orlando Magic have left the court.
Wow.
With 3:56 left until game time. So
good for them. Good for them.
Yeah.
I guess, that's probably going to be it for the rest of the games today as well. I don't see any other teams playing.
No, I think that'll be it. But this is really interesting that this has started developing now. And the idea that the Raptors and Celtics were at least I saw the first to sort of float this idea, and the rest of the NBA is sort of jumping on it, I think is great. And it shows this league wants to push for change. I think it was Jaylen Brown tweeted last night. He just wants to be protesting right now. And when you look at what's happened in the U.S., you completely understand it. And this isn't just a U.S. issue, as we've brought up on this podcast before. This is an issue around the world, in Canada, in Europe, wherever. It's racism is a problem. And it's sad to see that it's come to this, and that it's been this bad, and we've seen such little change when people have demanded it for so long.
Yeah.
And, I'm new to this movement. It sort of hadn't affected me until recently, and the George Floyd thing's really gotten me a bit more involved. I think it's gotten a lot of people more involved, and it's great to see everybody sort of uniting around this one issue and pushing for equality, because everybody should be equal. And that's just the simple truth of it. Other NBA news, Brett Brown was fired by the Sixers after they got swept by the Celtics. So that sort of made sense after their terrible playoffs.
I will say, just as a I'm a little out of my element talking basketball, but if I were to pick a team, it would be the Celtics. Just because in 2009, I remember watching their run against the Lakers, and I remember watching like Paul Pierce and Rajon Rondo and Kevin Garnett playing, and that's like, I don't know if this is like relevant to what we're talking about, but I'm definitely rooting for the Celtics. I know that everyone's a big Raptors. I don't know why, but I just remember, like, I've been to Boston, like I've driven past where they play, and it's been a dream. Like, if I were to see a basketball game, I definitely want to see Boston. I'm also Irish, so like the logo and everything. So
okay, now you have to
rooting for
all
the
of a sudden
Celtics.
just okay.
He's Irish too. God.
All right.
I'm Scottish, by the way.
I see. Okay, definitely some beef already.
A little bit of beef. I don't know. The Celtics have been very forward thinking as well. Jaylen Brown has been very involved in the protests and pushing for change. So honestly, it's probably not a terrible team to choose to root for. Although I'd say maybe don't do that when you're watching them play the Raptors. But I understand it. I think a lot of people understand it. And it's good to see them pushing for real change and trying to really drive everything home that this is a massive issue and this needs to be addressed. Let's move on to baseball, because we need to hear Aiden talk a little bit more. Aiden, what has happened in baseball over the last week?
Well, the Toronto Blue Jays, when all they need is pitching, decide to go out and get a home run hitting first baseman / DH. And, honestly, I'm not too disappointed with the trade, just because all they gave up was cash for this guy who is a former All-Star just 1 year ago. This guy hit 30 home runs last year, and you gave up nothing, no players for him. So, I'll take it. I think the Jays do need to add a couple more pieces to their bench to really fill out the rest of their offense. Rowdy Tellez hasn't been, that consistent so far this year. So I could see Vogelbach. His name is Vogelbach. I should probably say that. Coming in here and being a decent fringe guy for them. I don't see him being like an everyday starter, but he'd be a unbelievable guy to come in in like the ninth inning when they're down by a run. You got a right-handed pitcher on the mound, and he comes up and he can hit a home run for you. So I think that's huge. But the thing with the Jays right now is that they got a ton of injuries. Bo Bichette's on the IL. Nate Pearson's dealing with some elbow problems. Trent Thornton as well. They got a bunch of guys that are banged up right now. I think Matt Shoemaker as well as just went on the IL. So come the August 31st trade deadline, which is in less than a week now, I would expect the Jays to go after some pitching. I know they've been looking at some guys from the Pirates. I wouldn't be surprised to see them go after, a bigger name, someone who is, more young and has some term on his contract. I know they've been floating the name Trevor Bauer, which, would be huge if they got him. He's having a phenomenal year. I don't know if the Jays are ready to give up any like big name prospects at this time, but we'll see. This rebuild, I guess, for the Jays has kind of escalated really quickly. And this team is 500 right now with Bichette injured, with Pearson injured. So if they got healthy, then, these guys might actually be a playoff team this year. So I would expect them to go out and get some pitching depth. But I wouldn't expect them to trade a prospect like Austin Martin or Jordan Groshans at this point. But hopefully they make some moves, because I do believe that management is ready to spend some money. And I do believe that this team is good enough to make the playoffs.
Could Lucas Giolito? There you go. Could he potentially be?
I definitely don't see that happening.
No, even though he threw a no-hitter last night?
I know it's a good transition, but no, I don't see them getting him. He's very young and is very good. Like Connor just said, he threw a no-hitter last night. So I think the White Sox are gonna, keep him around for a little bit longer here. Would be sick if the Jays got him, but it would take a lot to get him. That's crazy how he got the no-hitter last night. I think he threw like just around 100 pitches in the 9 innings, which is very hard to do. Like averaging like less than 15 pitches an inning. So yeah, good for him. First no-hitter of 2020 so far. I think that last hit, or like the final out, was kind of a little bit nerve-wracking because it was like a line drive. You thought the guy might not have gotten there, but he made a good catch and got him out. There's always like a good defining defensive play in these no-hitter / perfect games. So that was definitely one of them. And I think also a cool thing about that is Lucas Giolito threw a no-hitter in MLB The Show 20 when they were doing like the whole players tournament. And then he actually did it in real life as well. So, yeah.
That's so double no-hitter year for him then.
Yeah.
Patrick, do you have anything you want to add to baseball talk?
Sorry, Mike was off. No, but no, I don't think that.
All right.
Honestly, don't blame you. Baseball has been pretty dead and is continuing to.
I do want to say one more thing. I think MLB is looking at playoff bubbles, which we touched on a little bit last week, but they're discussing playoff bubbles in California and in Texas.
So great. So 2 places who have had massive outbreaks.
Yeah, it could get worse. It could get worse for the MLB.
They've definitely done the worst. They've definitely done the worst job out of all the leagues.
And NFL might do even worse because they're considering doing like the same thing, traveling every week. So.
At least baseball didn't allow fans like MLS is doing, which
right.
If you want my thoughts on that, go to the MLS Multiplex podcast, where you can also get my thoughts on Alphonso Davies becoming the first Canadian male to win the Champions League, because that's huge for Canadian soccer. Mm-hmm. But in other soccer news, a small player that some people might have heard of, only some, guy named Lionel Messi. He's this little small Argentinian guy. He's pretty talented. He's been with Barcelona for like 20 years. According to Argentine sources, he has filed some sort of thing saying he wants to leave the club. That is massive. Barcelona most recently, speaking of Alphonso Davies, lost 8-2 against Bayern Munich in the Champions League quarter semifinal. Quarterfinal. Where Davies kind of embarrassed the entire Barcelona team. And Barcelona has been just completely inept when it comes to just everything. Their player acquisition has been very poor, and Messi has reached his limit. So apparently, he has a clause in his contract that allows him to just leave whenever he wants to. But Barcelona claimed that clause ended in June. So he can't just leave. They want his full release clause, which is 700 million euros. Equivalent to that is $825 million, which is more revenue than the New England Patriots made last year.
Wow, that's bananas.
You could buy all of the revenue from the New England Patriots from 1 year, and you still couldn't buy Lionel Messi. So,
wow,
that's just insane. There are reports that he wants to go to Manchester City, which would be pretty huge for them because when you bring in Lionel Messi, that's pretty huge.
Yeah.
Part of that deal, according to ESPN, is that would be a long-term contract, and after 3 years, he would move to New York City FC in MLS. So, please, I want him here. I want him in MLS, even if it's 3 years from now. That would be insane, and having him on New York City FC could be crazy. I wrote an article yesterday about Luis Suarez potentially leaving Barcelona as well, who's the Uruguayan striker who has the guy, for you guys, he's the guy who bit somebody at the World Cup.
I know.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
I've heard of that happening. So yes, that rings a bell for me too.
Yeah, he was that guy, and he's rumored to be leaving Barcelona, and he's interested in coming to MLS apparently. So I looked at the 5 destinations where he could potentially end up.
Is it Diego Costa? Is that him? Did he bite someone as well?
Probably. He just gets a lot of red cards.
Okay. My limited soccer knowledge. Okay.
Luis Suarez has bitten like 3 or 4 different people.
Okay. But Diego Costa, is he not liked? Because I remember hearing.
Yeah, no, people don't like him because he's just not a very nice player. He likes to get red cards.
Gotcha.
So is there any chance that Luis Suarez comes to TFC at all?
I don't think Toronto FC. I think it'll probably be maybe like New York City, like one of the New York City clubs, the New York clubs, maybe like Miami
LA Galaxy,
or LA. Yeah, LA. If you read my article, you can see all the teams that I threw out there. There's one interesting one that I don't think people have really thought about, but I think would be really cool to see him go there.
And is this the end of an era in Barca then? Do they have any other help besides Messi and Suarez, or are they done now?
Well, it's Barcelona. Of course, they have good players. You know, they have Ansu Fati, who's like a 17-year-old Spanish kid who looks very, very good. They've got Antoine Griezmann, who was a huge part of France winning the World Cup in 2018. They've got some players, but it's just not Barcelona anymore. And they just fired their manager and brought in Ronald Koeman, who we'll see if he's successful. But it's very interesting to watch this situation play out. And if you don't like soccer but you like drama, I'd recommend following this.
Yeah. Breaking
from Adrian Wojnarowski. The Milwaukee Bucks have decided to boycott Game 5, source tells ESPN. So, first boycott, we'll see if the Toronto Raptors and Boston Celtics do it tomorrow night. But they're showing that this wasn't a bluff, and they're really serious about getting change, and that's amazing. And
let's hope other teams follow suit as well. That's fantastic news. I like that.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a chance NBA cancels the playoffs now?
That's tough. If enough teams boycott, potentially, I think the NBA will push for change so that they don't do that, and they'll start doing a lot more. But it also wouldn't surprise me to see them cancel the playoffs or postpone it. Yeah, personally,
because that would be the biggest thing to do, right? That would be like the biggest statement you could possibly make.
That would be the biggest conversation starter, and that's what this entire thing is supposed to be about is starting a conversation about racism and a conversation about what's happening in the U.S. and the racism issue in the U.S. So, yeah, it's just good to see them making change and trying to push for change and really using their platform for something that they believe very strongly in and something that they think will help push equality and everything along those lines forward. I do want to mention one last thing in soccer because you mentioned Luis Suarez. Carlos Puyol, who is a former Barcelona legend, one of the best Spanish defenders of all time, tweeted out his support for Messi. And Suarez replied to the tweet with 2 clapping emojis. So I think it's probably good as done his time there. And there are rumors of Ajax, but I think MLS is the prime candidate because he's very good friends with Nicolas Ladero, who plays for the Seattle Sounders. And he's said in the past that he'd be very interested in coming to MLS. But that's all the other sport news. There's no football to talk about that we're going to talk about because, well, actually, let's do talk about football for a second. Detroit Lions, what did they do this week?
The Detroit Lions, they canceled their practice. Yeah, honestly, like great move by them after the whole Jacob Blake shooting. I guess the players thought that it was necessary to take a step back from sports for the day and cancel practice, and they all went out outside their facility, and they had a note written on a whiteboard. They got some players speaking out to the media, just saying that we won't be silent, and this is bigger than sports, and just relaying the messages. They were sharing some of the stories that they've gone through in their lives as well. So it's cool to see an entire organization come out like that and show support to what they believe in. And it's cool that, it seemed like the rest of the NFL community backed them up on that. Guys on Twitter from other teams were showing their support to the Lions. NFL was doing a good job reposting what they were doing. So yeah, it's a big move for them as well. And yeah, I mean, these are important times for NFL teams, like training camp and stuff, but it just goes to show that Black Lives Matter is what's on their minds right now. So it's a good move by them.
And this is from Malika Andrews. Game balls are being put away as the Bucks decide to boycott Game 5 against the Magic. So sounds like this is actually happening, and we'll see the ramifications for that, whether or not they give Game 5 to Orlando or if they join the Bucks in the boycott. That'll be really interesting to watch. But let's talk hockey because Patrick hasn't talked in a while and we need to get some of his thoughts. Let's start with, because we only have like 9 minutes left on the call. Let's start with Colorado, Dallas. I don't know if you guys have been following this series, but what happened to Colorado? Like, they're just not doing very well. And
Dallas is doing good.
Dallas are killing it. What's up with that series?
I think people underestimated Dallas. I feel like for the longest time, Dallas has been a one-line team, and they've been very top-heavy. And I think people are starting to realize how good Miro Heiskanen is. For all the talk about Quinn Hughes and Cale Makar, I've always been a bigger fan of Miro Heiskanen. I think out of Hughes, Makar, Dahlin, Heiskanen is by far the better one out of all of them right now. I think Dahlin will be the better 1D long-term in a couple of years if Buffalo gets a bit more support. But you have Heiskanen, you have Klingberg, you finally have secondary scoring, Dennis Gurianov, Rupe Hintz, someone like Joe Pavelski, players playing in secondary roles to sort of alleviate some of the pressure from Ben, Seguin, and Radulov. And they're playing better defensively too. For so many years with Lindy Ruff, who was a defensive coach, their underlying metrics were dreadful. And they're seeing it now. And I think it comes down to how much Dallas was underestimated. I think this could go 6 or 7. Obviously, I don't think Colorado's done. Colorado looks good, but I think one of the teams is going to have to tighten up defensively and sort of try a different approach because you can't coast your way scoring and scoring and scoring. And I'm not saying Dallas isn't good at defense because they do play a well-rounded defensive system, but they might have to shake some things up if they want to make this a closer series. But in all honesty, I think with Dallas, it's just, they're actually good. They have depth on defense. They have a fantastic goaltending situation. So I think people are starting to realize how good they actually are. I actually predicted Dallas to win this series in 7. So we'll see what happens.
Wow.
That's a good pick.
That's really good. It's looking good so far.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, like Khudobin, he's been okay. Mm-hmm. And, a lot of people thought when Bishop went down, they wouldn't have that same level of goaltending, but they've been able to, I wouldn't say shut down that top line because McKinnon has been able to score and Landeskog and Rantanen have been getting on the board with some points via power play as well. But they've shut down that Kadri line that was so good in the first round. In that JT Compher line, Tyson Jost, they have 0 points so far in this series. And like Patrick said, the depth guys on Dallas have been able to capitalize, and with Joe Pavelski, Gurianov. But also, it's the big boys in Radulov and Ben and Sagan. Sagan didn't have a goal up until game 1 of this Colorado series. Radulov has already had, I think, 3 goals in this series, and Ben's been getting some assists as well.
And if you look at look at the game against Calgary, the final score was 6-3. Most of those points, I think they had the top line had 1 point. Everything else was coming from Gurianov and those guys. So
yeah,
I think that's a big thing. Sorry to cut you
off. I think Gurianov had 5 points in that game, 4 goals, 1 assist.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely wouldn't count out Colorado still. I think I could see Dallas going up 3-1 and then Colorado maybe pushing it to 7, and then it could go either way in game 7. But yeah, Dallas is really, surprising a lot of people with this series.
Do you think that this could be Dallas's year?
I think if it's not their year, it's not the end for Dallas. And the same goes for Colorado. Obviously, I think there's still a lot of Radulov's older, but he doesn't play like he's older. Pavelski's proven he can still play. I think this could be their year, and it'd be really cool if it was. I feel like, Dallas, I have no reason not to like Dallas. They seem like a likable team. They have good players, but it could be, I think. But there's also, I don't know, the West is really hard because I think Vegas could do it as well. I know a lot of people have Vegas going to the Cup final, but I wouldn't be too upset if Dallas went all the way.
What is your Stanley Cup final prediction?
Well, my bracket got all messed up because Carolina's out and
same here.
The Capitals are out. It was Washington and then I think Colorado or Vegas, but now I don't know. I don't know. I don't know anymore. Hockey. I can't predict on hockey. I don't know if you guys saw last year, but Nigel got every first round pick wrong.
Really?
He went over 16 on the teams he wanted.
Wow, that is.
So hockey's impossible to bet on. I think of all the sports to bet on, I think it's stupid to bet on hockey.
Yeah.
And we see that every single year. Montreal beating Pittsburgh, Columbus sweeping Tampa last year. I don't know, but as of right now that I had Washington going all the way, but I think out of the teams that remain, I'm probably going to go with. I'll pick the underdog. I'll go with the Islanders going all the way. Why not?
Interesting.
Yeah, I like to see them. I like to see them.
I could see that. They're not doing well today though. But
are they still up 3-0? Or the Flyers up 3-0 still?
Last time I checked, yeah, it's 3-0 midway through the second period. The Flyers chased Varlamov, and Kreis is in net now.
All right.
Interesting. I could see. I had Carolina going to the Cup final. I thought they had a serious chance this year, especially with their back end. But if I had to pick a team now, I'd probably go with Tampa. I think this might be their year. And
yeah, Tampa's sort of a weird one. I don't want to say they're underrated, but they're definitely underappreciated since everything that's happened. Yeah. The focus has been on Boston and Pasternak and Carolina's sort of resurgence and Toronto Columbus series that no one's really talked about Tampa. And I'm never going to call them underrated because they're one of the most full teams in the league. But, people are kind of forgetting about the guys they have, on the back end, up front. So it'd be cool to see them do well as well.
No Steven Stamkos as well. No Stamkos right now. I picked Tampa to win the Cup in my bracket, so let's hope.
It's a good pick. They have stars like Luke Shen, so
yes,
he'll
Zach
carry them.
It went end to end yesterday.
That was filthy. Andy Green, man. Andy Green.
Andy Green, yeah.
Yeah. So I think we'll take a quick break now because our call's about to end. And we'll finish with the rest of hockey because there's a ton of stuff that's happened over the last week. And we want to dive into the Leafs trade, Montreal, Philly. The Arizona Coyotes got their punishment handed out today for the draft stuff. So we'll be right back and to finish up our hockey talk. All right. So, Patrick, before we went to break, you did mention the fact that Washington, you had them going to the Cup final, and they promptly got swept by the New York Islanders. Yes. And as part of the fallout to that was Todd Reirden, head coach of the Washington Capitals, was fired. I think this was pretty expected considering how poorly they've done since he's taken over 2 years ago for Trotz because they didn't pay him, which was definitely a mistake. What did you guys think of this firing? Do you think it was deserved? Where do you sort of stand on all of that?
I definitely think it was deserved. Look, I mean, you want Backstrom and Ovechkin to get another chance at the Cup, and Todd Reirden has failed that. And I think it's must be kind of bittersweet if you're a Capitals fan, seeing former coach who brought you to the Cup final, beating your team, and then your coach gets fired. In my mind, Barry Trotz is one of the, if not the best coach in the National Hockey League, and I think this is fantastic for him. And I think it's unfortunate they didn't pay him. And I think it's a good move for the Capitals. Obviously, some sort of change is needed. And you look at the options of the guys who are available. You have someone like Gerard Gallant, who I'm very fond of. You have maybe even like an assistant, like maybe Mike Babcock. The situation would be a little bit weird. You might have Bruce Boudreau. I know there's a lot of rumors of him going back to Washington.
No, he's coming to Toronto to be an assistant coach.
Oh, yeah, of course. So plenty of options, but I think it's a good move overall. And I think, even though they don't play like their age, Ovechkin and Backstrom are getting older and they want another shot at the Cup. And if that can happen with Reirden, then by all means. And I think Boudreau or one of those guys is an excellent fit there.
Yeah, I think ultimately, they had no success in the 2 years after they won the Cup. So it's really unacceptable for a team with this much offense, Ovechkin and Backstrom, Kuznetsov, whatever. They got to get out of the first round at least, and they weren't able to do it with Reirden. And I think, Capitals management saw that, hey, there might be some better guys out there that we can go get. So I think, that's why they made the move ultimately. They just didn't reach expectations. And the team, especially in game 5, was it that they got eliminated by the Islanders? They just didn't look motivated at all. They had no fight in their game. So I think, that's obviously the biggest tipping point. And that's why Reirden got the boot.
Yeah, it was an interesting decision. They're going to have some decisions to make this offseason. Braden Holtby is about to be UFA. So we'll see if they keep him. They've got, I think it's Ilya Samsonov, correct?
Yeah.
He's coming up, and he looks like he could be very, very good. So maybe it's time they move on from Holtby and just go full Samsonov. But, yeah, they have some really interesting decisions to make. And clearly the Reirden hire wasn't the right fit. I've seen Babcock floated a lot for the Washington gig, and it'll be interesting if they do go with him. I believe, what's his name? Peter Laviolette. I think he's still available as a coach. So maybe there's a fit there as well. There's a lot of very good head coach options for Washington to potentially hire, and it'll be interesting to see who they pick and if they go with a veteran guy or if they stick with the trend that they've had over the last while in hiring a rookie or second. This is like a second gig in the NHL sort of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't really think there's much else to add. Why don't we talk about Marc-Andre Fleury, Alan Walsh, and Peter DeBoer, because that situation was hysterical. If you didn't see what happened, Alan Walsh, the agent of Marc-Andre Fleury, tweeted out a picture of Fleury making a save and a sword sticking through him with Peter DeBoer's name written on the blade. That was a situation, and it was up for 24 hours. What did you guys think of it? Because that was nuts.
Alan Walsh has always sort of been a pretty emotional agent. I've seen him on Twitter. He blocks anyone who who asked him a question about his player, who criticized one of his players, like he's agents for Fleury. I think Jonathan Drouin as well, who's obviously been the face of criticism, and
Max Pacioretty.
Pacioretty as well. I understand. Like, actually, no, I don't understand. I understand as an agent caring about your player, but at the end of the day, he's an agent, and Marc-Andre Fleury knows what is expected of him as a player, and as a goalie, especially if you are not playing up to certain standards, you will not be playing. And I know he has to represent his players. He has to have players that look good so that he looks good and all that stuff. But it just seemed pretty immature, pretty insensitive. And, I don't think Peter DeBoer was deliberately hurting Marc-Andre Fleury. And if Marc-Andre Fleury or Alan Walsh think that, then they are totally misunderstanding what happens in sports, and how that's just the reality of being an athlete, being a goalie especially, is like, sometimes you're not going to play. And if you aren't playing well enough, you aren't going to be playing. And that's pretty obvious for Marc-Andre Fleury, who definitely one of the more overrated goalies, in my opinion, in the past couple of years, who has been nothing but inconsistent. And you have someone like Robin Leonard who is outplaying you, then, you can't be upset. Or if it's Alan Walsh, you can't be upset that someone outplayed your player. So,
yeah, I just didn't really understand it because, like, isn't this exactly what happened to Fleury in Pittsburgh when Matt Murray took over, and like there was nothing from Alan Walsh then, and it worked out. Like, you won the cup, and Fleury seemed okay. Maybe it's just because he had a better relationship with Mike Sullivan potentially, but also, like, you can't just be mad at DeBoer. Like, it was management for bringing in Robin Leonard in the first place, and everyone was kind of like, "Whoa, they already had Fleury. Why are you getting Leonard?" But no, exactly what Patrick said. Like, Leonard is playing better than Fleury, so there's really no need to be mad. And Fleury did get into one of the games in the Chicago series, I believe. I think he was in a back-to-back, and he played well. And, I definitely think that if Leonard kind of falls off a cliff like he may have last game, Fleury could get back in the net anytime soon. And, yeah, especially what happened last night. I think he let in 4 or 5 goals yesterday against Vancouver. So, there might be a chance that we see Fleury back in the net sooner rather than later.
More huge news from Shams Charania. I can't say his
name.
Sam
Charania?
Charania?
I don't know.
Basically, Bucks players are in locker room attempting to reach the Attorney General of Wisconsin, Josh Call. Sources tell at the Athletic NBA at Stadium, Magic players are leaving the arena soon, not accepting the Bucks' forfeit. So they're not taking the win.
That's huge.
Oh,
that's huge.
Good, right? Yeah.
That's a good thing.
Yes, that's massive.
It would be pretty bad.
It'd be so bad if they didn't.
Yeah.
And he tweeted this a minute later. Rockets OKC players are planning to boycott Game 5 of their series as well.
Sick.
So this is starting a movement in the NBA, and that's amazing. I'll keep you updated on what happens over the next 40 minutes because all this has really happened in the last half hour. And to see this much happening and this much good news and everything like that, it's good to see. But back to hockey. I don't really think we need to add much more to that whole situation. It was just sort of a joke.
It's just weird. It's just weird.
Yeah,
and
made no sense. And
Walsh is an adult. He knows better. He should know better.
And same with Fleury, because Fleury is his boss, and he could have very easily said, take it down. And he waited a day to do that until just before his press conference, which was just as bad, and him deflecting and not answering really questions about whether or not he knew it was going up. So, yeah, just not a good situation all around, and something that a good person in Fleury should probably know a little bit better to do. But everybody has their bad moments, as the Steve Dangle podcast pointed out, so it makes sense. Let's quickly hit Arizona Coyotes. This broke just before we started recording. They have been issued their punishment for the draft testing prospects before they were allowed to, and it's quite the penalty. They're going to lose the second rounder this year because they've traded their first rounder in the Taylor Hall trade, if you remember that. So they don't have a pick in the first 2 rounds of this year's draft, and they're losing their first round pick next year. So quite the steep penalty. Do you think it's deserved for what they did, or do you think they should Did they deserve a bit more? Did they deserve a bit less? Where do you sort of stand on the punishment?
I think it's about right. Like at first, when you first told me, Connor, I was like stunned. I was like, they had to give up a first round pick and a second. Like, that seems like a lot to give up. Like that's more than the Leafs gave up for or got back for Kapanen.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It's tough because obviously what the Coyotes did was wrong, but no one's ever done it before. So there isn't really like a landmark, I guess, for what the penalty could have been. But it just shows that the NHL is really taking it seriously. So I guess that's a good thing. It just sucks to be on the Coyotes.
Yeah,
like, that's a lot to give up. That's a really good player they could get in the first round or second round.
Yeah, I'm sure all 5 of their fans are upset. No, I'm kidding. But if in all seriousness, though, that's pretty that's brutal. And I think it's good to laugh at. I was never a big fan of John Chayka. John Chayka was such a weird GM, and he was praised as like the analytics, the poster boy for analytics as a general manager, even though a lot of his moves were not in line with what the analytics community thought. He's made some questionable deals. The Kessel one, the Clayton Keller extension, super weird. And I think in this whole thing, they knew what they did was wrong. And if Hall doesn't re-sign, then they lose. They'll be down a first and a second next year as well. So really awkward situation for them. But I think overall, like as an organization, this just sort of adds to it because, look, like Hall might not re-sign. I don't see why he would re-sign. Hall is 28, which is weird because I remember when he was drafted and he's getting up there. He wants to go to a hockey market. Looking at him, he was in Edmonton when they were at their worst. One good year in New Jersey, not a hockey market. This year in Arizona, I think he wants to find stability. And it was Chris Johnson who reported earlier that he wants to find stability and he wouldn't mind taking a pay cut if it means he can play on a good team in a hockey market. Yeah. But if you're Arizona, you'd have to be pretty upset. Look, no first round this year, no third round. You lose these picks. You lose more if Hall doesn't re-sign. Their roster construction is really odd. Like I said, the Clayton Keller extension, Christian Dvorak and Nick Schmaltz are fine players. Nick Schmaltz is your 1C. Like, this is a really messy team. And, I know people make fun of the Minnesota Wild for being the sort of average middling team, but there's hope for them. But I don't see how this situation in Arizona can get much better.
And they're also potentially thinking about moving Oliver Ekman-Larsson. That's been thrown up by Elliot Friedman a few times. And I kind of understood the Clayton Keller situation. I know Rachel Dory and Ian Tulloch said they sort of understood it. They thought it was a little bit much. But the fact that they do get to keep him for 7 years, I think is pretty big. I don't know. I understood that. I didn't think Jacob was a terrible GM. I thought the Kessel trade made sense because I didn't think Galchenyuk was a fit on that team.
Yeah.
And they really didn't give up much else. I think it might have just been trade. 1-for-1.
No, that was a good deal. But I mean, something like Barrett Hayton, picking Barrett Hayton at 5, Hughes was there, Zadina was there. That was definitely questionable. It just seemed weird. Some of the moves just didn't seem to be, there didn't really seem to be like a plan and a trajectory in place, So it's a weird situation, and this sort of adds to it. And I don't think Hall's going to sign, and that would be brutal. So we'll see what they do. And
he isn't even at the organization anymore because he quit quit straight up because he was offered another position at another organization. I can't remember. I think it was rumored to be the Devils.
Taylor Hall?
Or Chayka. John Chayka.
Oh, Chayka. Sorry, I thought you said Taylor Hall. I was like,
no.
John
Chayka.
Hall back to the Devils.
Yeah.
Hall back to the Devils. No, I think, where do you see Hall ending up? I'm curious to hear what your answer is.
Asking me or Aiden?
Both of you.
Oh.
That's so tough. Free agency is always weird. I mean, everyone wants Hall to go to their favorite team, but he's willing to take a pay. He's willing to take a pay cut. He's willing, and he wants to win now. And I'm thinking of a team that needs help on the wing.
I'm thinking of a team whose hat you're wearing.
Really? Yeah. Well, I don't want to say. I didn't want to say that because I look like a.
They got a ton of cap space.
They do. They have
a ton of cap space. They need a star forward.
That's true.
Hockey market.
Do you, as a Habs fan, think that Montreal could win like next year?
No.
Okay.
No.
Then Taylor Hall might not be thinking that too, and that's why he might not want to go there.
If you bring in Taylor Hall, do you think you could?
I think you have a chance. it increases the likelihood, and I think they have, like, Montreal is a pretty their forwards are pretty balanced. They play a good system, and we can touch on Montreal. I obviously have a lot to say. I could see it happening. I mean, like I said, he wants to be in a market. He's willing to take a pay cut, but if he doesn't take a pay cut, if there's one team that has space, it is Montreal. I definitely think you're going to see some of Montreal's wingers moved, so you could have a space for a Taylor Hall. So I'd be cool with that. He's from Kingston, obviously, and I think, he's 28. He wants to win. He's a Hart Trophy winner, so it'd be awesome. But free agency is such a hard thing to predict because I never know where players are going to sign, and I can never, unless it's like confirmed that he's interested in that team, it's impossible to predict. But I'd be happy with that. What do you guys think? Where do you think he'll go?
I think I said Minnesota a couple of weeks ago.
I think
I'll just stick with them. I think, they're a team that is still trying to win. I don't know if they're close, but, I do think that they can free up some cap space and bring in Hall. And, Minnesota's a good hockey city to play in as well.
I think Minnesota
State.
Yeah. Minnesota have other issues they need to solve. Like, they don't like their goaltending. So that's going to be something they have to address.
But they have a decent defensive core, and they got some pieces up front, aging guys. So I think bringing in another guy who's in the prime of his career could help them out, and maybe they could take a run at it. But like you said, goaltending. If they get a goaltender, then they're in a much better position.
Yeah, Minnesota makes sense. I've been pushing Montreal for a long time before even people really considered him going to Montreal. I think he is a very good fit there. I think he'd just work. And with the amount of cap space, I think you could get him for 7.5, 8. And that's not an insane amount of money. And I think you have 20 million in cap space, correct?
Yeah, I think 18.5, something like that. But you have certain players who I think are going to get traded and all sorts of stuff. So they're in a good position. They're going to
make some serious moves this offseason. Yeah. And I wouldn't be shocked to see Taylor Hall being one of them. I think they're going to buy.
They're going to buy.
Yeah, definitely.
They got a ton of draft picks too, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
They're in a good spot.
Yeah.
They're in a good spot other than the Carey Price contract. Which
I agree. That was my hot. I know we're talking about hot takes later, but I've been on the trade Carey Price train for a while. So
that's big. That's a big one.
That counts as a hot take, but that's.
Yeah. I think we talked about that last week. I think they should trade him this offseason.
Yeah, it's not because I don't like him. It's not because I've criticized the contract, not because I don't think he's a good goalie, but I just think that's a lot of money for a goalie.
Especially
10.5
going into his mid to late 30s.
Yeah, especially when he's at his best, the team cannot score. They beat Pittsburgh, and it's this is what happens when Carey Price is at his best. It's even when he's at his best, they still can't. He can't score the goals.
Yeah,
the team can't score. For as long as I've watched this team, they've never been able to score consistently. They've never had a Matthews. They've never had a Pettersson. They've never had a guy who, when the puck is on his stick, they're fun to watch and they're going to score. So that's why it's I want him to win. Send him to Colorado. I don't know. Get him, wow. get him a chance to win a cup, because I don't think it'll happen in Montreal for a decent amount of time.
So what do you think Montreal's offseason moves are going to be this year?
Okay. Well, this is where I have a lot to say. I definitely think you're going to see some forwards on the move. I definitely think one of Domi or Danault is going to be traded. Be cool if they signed Hall, but look, there's a lot. This playoffs, I was rooting for the Lafreniere pick. I was rooting for them to be in the Lafreniere sweepstakes. I wanted at least, if not Lafreniere, them to get 9th overall, which was the plan. But before the playoffs started, there was so much uncertainty surrounding their younger players, Nick Suzuki, Kasperi Kapanen, specifically what their role was. And there was more of a role given to players like Philip Danault and Max Domi. And this whole playoffs shifted the entire thing. And I think that's a positive. But so today, Julian had his press conference. And yesterday, Philip Danault said, I saw my role change in Montreal, and for everything I've accomplished, my role should never change in Montreal. And that was a massive quote that he said. And as a veteran, I don't think you should say that. And I think that sort of was a kiss goodbye for Philip Danault, because he was the 1C, and now he was pushed out by 2 younger players. And then you have Claude Julien today saying Domi is best as a top 6 center, but he also said that Kotkaniemi and Suzuki established themselves as the 1-2. So he was valuing Domi at center, even though Domi is clearly a winger. He was valuing Danault at center as a top 6 center, even though he said that the kids are going to do it. So I think one or both of them will be gone and maybe packaged into the top 10 of this year's draft. But I don't think they can go into next year with those 3 centers when in a way all of them could be playing top 6. All the wingers they have, you have Drouin, you have Domi, you have Tatar. Those are 3 top 6 wingers. So I do think one of Tatar, Domi, or Danault will definitely be moved, probably into the top 10. I could see Domi or Danault going to Buffalo. Buffalo really needs another center behind Jack Eichel. Danault's the perfect two-way guy. Maybe there'd be other secondary pieces, of course, but I definitely think some forwards will be moved because they have too many forwards playing through the lineup.
Do you think they could move into the top 10 by trading one of those guys?
I think with Jack Eichel, like Philip Danault is 26 or 25. I don't think it would be Danault for the 8th, but I think it would be some sort of package of Danault, maybe a second, maybe 2 seconds, and a roster player for that 8th overall pick. I think Jack Eichel wants to win. We'll see. I don't know, but I definitely think one of those guys will move because it was just a weird press conference. You can't value 2 players as top 6 centers, but then also say that the 2 young kids are going to be centers for the future starting next season.
Yeah.
It's, of course he would say that that Domi's a center because teams are going to want that, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that would sort of be the offseason outlook that I think I would love to see Domi traded. I think he's going to ask more than what they're willing to give him. So yeah.
I see Toronto and Montreal being very good trade partners. I think you center a trade around Victor Mete and Max Domi to Toronto for something like an Andreas Janssen and a Travis Dermott.
Yep.
I think that makes a lot of sense because Domi doesn't have a ton of value because he is an RFA. Janssen's got a bit more term. Dermott's going in RFA as well as Victor Mete. I think that makes a lot of sense. And Mete's a right-handed defenseman. Yeah.
No, he's not.
Mete's left. Mete's left. He can play left and right, but he usually plays left, and he shoots left.
Okay. I still think that makes sense because he's stuck behind Weber and Petrie on the right either way. And if he's playing on the left, yeah, he's probably their top left-handed defenseman, apart from maybe Ben Sherratt.
Yeah, I don't like Victor Mete, if I can be honest. I've never liked him. I think I would be more than happy to see him gone, and I would welcome Janssen.
Well, hey, I'm not a big fan of Travis Dermott, so.
Okay, there we go. Then it evens out. So.
Well, yeah, I'd probably prefer Dermott over Mete though. But
I'd
be happy with Domi.
You're also getting Domi instead of Janssen.
But right? I think Domi would obviously get paid more than Janssen would. So you're going to be losing a little bit of cap space.
Well, that's where you got the cap space and the captain trade, which we'll get to in a little bit.
Yeah, true.
And I think Domi's that grit and that little the Leafs need desperately.
I agree with that. Also, his dad played for the Leafs. I gotta be sick.
Dad played for the Leafs.
I don't see Montreal and Toronto as trade partners though. That's the only.
The last trade was what, the Plekanec trade?
Yeah.
For a second.
For a second, right? Yeah, I mean, I could see it. Domi, and he's what they need, and you lost some of that grit and some of the edge from the Kadri deal, and Domi is basically like that, skilled but also like intense and stuff like that. We'll see what happens. I think I could see them being trade partners, but it's a weird situation if you're a Habs fan because now Toronto has that pick right below Montreal and who they're gonna pick and in Montreal's case, I think it's a weird offseason that like a lot of times people always say that, oh, it's a big summer for Montreal. It's a big summer for Montreal and very little happens. Last year was a perfect example. Last year, everyone was expecting all these big things to happen and we didn't see anything. And
Aho almost happened.
Oh man, yeah, but what could have been.
That never was going to happen.
Yeah, it wasn't so much the cap hit, but it was all the signing bonuses because Carolina doesn't have a lot of money. Tom Dundon does not have a lot of money. And it was the signing bonuses that really hurt them. It wasn't so much the $9 million. But that would have been cool. But otherwise, I think the future's bright. I don't think it's that bright, if I can be honest, as a Habs fan.
Well, that's why you should give us Max Domi.
I think Nick Suzuki has a lot of potential.
Yeah.
So that's something to look forward to. I don't know if he's going to be a number one center, but
yeah, I don't think either two of them are going to be like a bona fide 1C, sort of dynamic offensively, but I think they can be serviceable as a 1-2 punch, sort of interchangeable. Yeah. And if that's enough, if they get enough support on the wings, then I can see I can see that happening.
I think Montreal's going to have a very interesting offseason. Mm-hmm. Do you think that they should move Weber or Price?
I've been beating the same drum for like 5 years now, or ever since that Weber trade happened, because when that trade happened, that was labeled as like the win now move. It was Weber can help us win now. We have Price, like we have to win. They got Radulov and they got Andrew Shaw. And that was sort of the move that was supposed to put them over the edge and compete with the big guys. The issue with Weber is obviously his contract. And if he were to retire, Nashville takes the cap hit at like $7 million. But if anything, I think they just put him on LTIR. I wouldn't move them because of my dislike for them, but more because of you have to know which way you're going as a team. And I always kind of point to the Leafs as like the blueprint for how you rebuild. You guys are both Leafs fans, right?
Yeah.
So, the Shanna plan, the quote heard around the hockey world was, there will be pain. It will be bad, and then they hunkered down and they accepted 3 years of just awful hockey, and it paid off. And you get good draft picks, and you sell off old assets and Bozak and JVR and Kessel, and you get picks. And I've really been pushing for Montreal to do that, because I don't think that they have enough to help Price and Weber win now. I also don't think Price and Weber are enough to lead Montreal to win now. And I think that's where I've always been pushing for Montreal to trade some of the veterans, such as Tatar, such as Deneau, maybe even someone like Jeff Petrie down the line. I'd be open to extending him. So yeah, players like Weber and Price, I could definitely see traded. Even Price maybe exposed to Vegas and stuff like that. So I've always been adamant about that, about picking a direction. Toronto has a direction. I know Toronto's had a rough go in the playoffs the past couple of years. I don't know what the urgency is. I know Leafs fans want to see them win, but I think there's time. I think they need to be a bit more patient. But, Toronto had a plan. They have centers. They have wingers. They're young. They're kind of going the same way. And I don't see that with Montreal, and I kind of see it as a messy situation. Sure, they have futures. Sure, they have exciting prospects coming up. But by the time, Suzuki and Kotkaniemi and Romanov and all these players are 26, Price and Weber are going to be in their 40s. And you can't win with that. And I'm not expecting Montreal to win next year. And if I'm expecting them to win in 2026, Price is not going to be Price. So I think you maximize value for those assets and move some of them. Maybe keep Weber, because I know every team that's rebuilding has a stoic leader. But I've always sort of been team, you're going for it or you're not. I don't like this kind of middle game, because, for the last few years, I've just seen Montreal barely make the playoffs, maybe win a series, or miss out and get 9th overall or 15th overall. And, I'd rather win multiple series or, bite the bullet as a fan and just kind of witness a couple years of terrible hockey if it's better in the long run.
I think they could really do a quick rebuild. If you flip a Shea Weber and a Price and you get a little bit younger, I think that would work. It's just you got to find a team who can take that money.
Exactly.
That's the biggest issue, because Price's contract is huge. It's 10.5 for the next 7-8 years. And Weber is getting paid for the next infinite decade, whenever you want to end it. And the cap recapture after that is $20 million.
It's insane. Yeah. So, and Nashville takes the hit. That's good. That's the one good thing about the deal is Nashville would take the hit, but we see that all the times. I don't think, I think there's wiggle room around that where they could put him on Robida Island or whatever you want to call it. But
yeah. It's very interesting, this Habs situation, because they're in this weird middle ground. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for them in terms of what they could do and where they could go. I see the Leafs and Montreal being potential trade partners. I think Janssen for Domi, and I think that makes a lot of sense.
I know a lot of Leaf fans want Jeff Petrie.
Yes, we do want Jeff Petrie.
He would be perfect. He's literally what Toronto needs. But we'll get into Toronto, I'm sure.
We're going to
do some good stuff.
We'll take a quick break because we only have 4 minutes left in the call. But I do want to say this. The NBA and NBPA have announced the postponement of today's games, noting they will be rescheduled. Portland Trailblazers and Lakers won't be playing Game 5 tonight, obviously. So we'll see what happens with that situation. But we'll be right back to talk everything Leafs, Kasperi Kapanen, trades, all that fun stuff. So we'll be right back. Hello, and in the span of 30 seconds and the time of this podcast, a lot has changed. The NBA has postponed all of the playoff games today. The players have called for a meeting tonight around the future of the NBA bubble and everything like that. And the front offices and owners didn't see this coming. So a lot has changed in basketball and the sports world. And this could be a real pivot point for sports right now. And we'll see what comes of it. Stuff's changing as we record, and it's been fun actually to see us react to everything as it happens. And I'm sure it'll be interesting to listen back to, but we're going to stick with hockey, and we're going to finish off with the Toronto Maple Leafs. That wonderful, wonderful team who made a trade. I know, it's the middle of the playoffs, and they made a trade. It's, unheard of. But basically, the entire trade was going to the Pittsburgh Penguins, right winger Kasperi Kapanen, defenseman Jesper Lindgren, and left winger Pontus Aberg, going to the Toronto Maple Leafs, 2020 first round pick, 15th overall, left winger Evan Rodriguez, center Philip Hallander, and defenseman David Warsofsky. What did you guys think about this trade?
So, I mean, it bugs me because it's a fantastic move, and Leafs fans should be excited. Now, some of the secondary players, Warsofsky, what was that?
Warsofsky.
I don't know enough about, but I do.
He was a minus 33 in the AHL last year.
He's a 30-year-old left-handed defenseman who's never going to see the ice for the Leafs or the Marlies. Basically, he was just to make the players work.
But as far as the other moves, obviously the big one getting 15th overall, that is fantastic, especially in what's already a pretty deep draft. Now, who the Leafs get at 15 is where there's a ton of debate right now because there's so many options, and I know all sorts of Leafs fans want different things, but I think they maximize on Kasperi Kapanen's perceived value. I was never that big a fan of Kasperi. He's a good player, but I think a lot of the expectations for him to be a top 6 player were a little bit of a reach. And I think he's a good penalty killer. He's a exciting skater, but his play with the puck, his underlying numbers, Corsi for, expected goals for, whatever one I look at, they never really caught the eye and they never really screamed top 6. He's a good third liner, and for a third line winger to get a 15th overall pick, to get Hollander is a wonderful move, and I think Dubas should be proud. I think Leafs fans should be pretty happy with it. I know you're a Kapanen fan, so sorry.
Yeah, I am a Kapanen fan. He was one of my favorite Leafs, him and Morgan Riley. I love both of them. But I think the Leafs committed highway robbery on this move.
Mm-hmm.
Kapanen had a pretty down year. I know Jim Rutherford said he was going to add to their top 6. And from experience on his time with the Leafs, when he played with Tavares and Matthews, it didn't really go well.
Nope.
So that might be a little optimistic on his end.
Yeah.
I just like the move. I think getting a first-round pick is really good. I think getting Hollander, from what it sounds like, he's going to be a pretty decent player, like middle 6 probably.
Top 9 at least, I would say.
Yeah, and he's a centerman, which the Leafs don't really have a ton of depth at center when it comes to prospects. Like they got Semyon Dargachintsev, but that's about it. Maybe Adam
how did you pronounce that? How did you pronounce that right? It's a long name.
Some names I can actually do. Others just, it doesn't make sense to me. But Semyon Dargachintsev actually makes sense to me for some reason. They've got Kelly Casilla, who know, Tyler Gaudette, who know, and Mikhail Abramov. Adam Brooks. They don't have a ton of center depth. And I think acquiring Hollander is big for that. He's done well in, I think he's in the Swedish Elite League, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, so
He
he's
plays
done
for
well
one of the better teams there as well.
Yeah, and he's done well there, and he's only 20 years old. He was like, what, third best player in Pittsburgh's system?
Mm-hmm.
I like it. And what did you think of the trade?
Well, when I first found out about the trade, all it was Kapanen to Pittsburgh, right?
So there was Jack Johnson's name was floating up there.
Yes, I know.
Hilarious.
I know.
The fourth period Swedes tweeted that out and deleted it immediately, but Twitter exploded.
Yeah. And like, honestly, I thought it could have actually happened. Like, if the Leafs get a first and a prospect, like, there's got to be something. There's got to be like a twist to it, right? They're also taking on Jack Johnson's contract, but no, they got away with nothing. Like David Warsofsky, okay, we'll take him instead. It sucks that they had to get rid of Kapanen because I wanted them to either trade Janssen or Engvall or Kerfoot and not Kapanen just because of what he offers on the penalty kill and also that gritty side to the game, which is what the Leafs are lacking. We always talk about they need to be more physical and a little bit more gritty, and that's what Kapanen was. So it sucks that they had to lose a player like that. But like Connor said, he was probably never going to crack the top six because they have a guy like Mitch Marner and William Nylander who play on the right side already. And when Kapanen did play in the top six, he didn't look too good either. So I think the Leafs saw that, he was kind of reaching his limit with this core, and they felt that, they could move on from him. And especially when you can get a first-round pick for Kasperi Kapanen, it's kind of a no-brainer. Like, we would never expect that. I would never expect them to do that. And it's not just a first-round pick. This is a 15th overall pick. Like, it's a pretty high pick as well in the draft. So I think it's a really good move for the Leafs. Let's hope that they put this cap space to work now and they get after, someone, maybe a defenseman. And also with the 15th overall pick, like, that's not even set in stone. They could look at moving that as well. I think that Dubas said that he's open to trading it if, there's a right trade that's there for them. So I think, that's still up in the air. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I was even saying to myself, like, would I prefer if they just traded Nylander in this trade instead of Kapanen and they keep Cappy? But I guess the Leafs thought that, maybe we can keep this core four together still and win. So.
Yeah, I don't think you deal Nylander. When you look at where his goals sort of happened this season, he's mostly in front of the net, and he's sort of turning into a good net front presence for the Leafs with a bit of skill as well. Yeah. And Kapanen just didn't go to the front of the net.
Yeah, ever. Kapanen just would – like, Kapanen's one of the fastest players in the league, and he's good at the penalty kill and stuff, but 5-on-5, he's not the best. So
yeah, and for all we know, they could keep Evan Rodriguez. He's an RFA whose qualifying offer will be worth $2 million, but they may negotiate something less than that, and it wouldn't shock me because I don't know how much interest he would have on the open market, personally.
Yeah, maybe flop, maybe trade him for like a third-round pick or something, third or fourth-round pick.
Flip him for a fourth-round pick or whatever. Or
yeah,
you could sign him to a cheaper deal, and he becomes your third-line center if you move Kerfoot.
Yeah, if you move Kerfoot, I don't think they should sign Rodriguez to anything more than. I don't think he'd probably make around $2 million. Rodriguez. I don't think they should do that though. If you're trading Kapanen, who is making 3.4 or something like that, you're only going to save like $1.5 million. Like, it doesn't look as good. So I think they should just move on from Rodriguez and flop him for a draft pick. And I don't see him being the third line center on this team. I don't think he's good enough yet. Like, he's probably a fourth line center right now in this league. He might turn into a third line guy, but I just don't think he's ready yet.
What are your thoughts on Evan Rodriguez, Patrick?
To be honest, I don't know enough about Rodriguez, but I know Hollander. I think he could definitely play on the third line, maybe even play center. I know that Dubas wanted him. He said he was right near the top of our board when we picked in the second round in 2018. We selected Sean Durzi, and then Pittsburgh selected him with the pick right after. We were kind of hoping he'd fall to the next pick. I don't know enough about Rodriguez, but I do know that Hollander is pretty good. He has offensive instincts, but he isn't like a raw goal scorer. And I think, like you said, Toronto down the middle in terms of prospects is a little bleak. and he can play both center and wing. So I think that'll be good. Have him on the third line, maybe when Nick Robertson steps in before Robertson moves to the lineup. But I think it's good. And like Dubas said, like, this is just the beginning. We saw reports of potentially them trading Andreas Janssen or Frederick Anderson, which opens a whole other discussion about maybe with that 15th overall pick, they get Yaroslav Askarov, which to me wouldn't make a lot of sense because he's only 18 and, you know, Toronto's trying to win, if not now, in at least a year or two. So it'll be interesting, but I think maybe moving that pick, maybe clearing up space for someone like Alex Pietrangelo, who might leave St. Louis. So look, for all the criticism that Kyle Dubas gets, and I know there's the sort of Twitter beef between like the Lou Lamoriello crowd and the Kyle Dubas crowd. Kyle Dubas should take some heat for some of the moves he's made, in particular Cody Ceci. I think he lost the Kadri trade. But with that, he's done some tremendous work. He signed Tavares. He got the backup goalie. He got the grit in
Muzzin Clifford.
He got, even though Barry didn't work out, you know, when defense was an issue, he gets Muzzin and Barry. That's a good job as a GM. And he should take some of the criticism, but I think people should realize that he's a pretty forward thinker. And when Toronto didn't have many picks, they didn't have a decent pool because all of them, the Leafs, were doing so well. I think he's starting to rebuild that while also building a team that's great now. So kudos to Kyle Dubas because I think he's done an excellent job.
Let's talk about that pick now, because obviously you do stuff with prospects when you look at the podcast that you're going to have starting up pretty soon. And we've talked about Rain Hernandez and Kyle Watson. And we have Rain tweeted out some prospects that he think will likely be available for Toronto at 15. He said Braden Schneider, Dylan Holloway, Caden Gooley, Seth Jervis, and Anton Lundell. What do you know about those guys? And are they seriously good players? Or?
Well, out of those, Anton Lundell is the one who stands out. I have him 7th overall in my draft board. So
Wow.
if he somehow falls to 15 and Leafs are picking him, that would be the steal of the draft because I think he's definitely going to become an unreal two-way center. Reminds me a little bit of Jonathan Toews, maybe on the lower end. Excellent shot, fantastic offensive instincts. He doesn't dazzle you with skill, but positioning, and I think he can be a 60-point center, 50 to 60 points in the league. So I really hope he's gone by the top 10. I think he should be from everything I've seen from Anton Lundell. You mentioned Seth Jarvis. Seth Jarvis is who I want Montreal to get at 16. Smooth winger. He's good offensively. He's good defensively. He has an excellent shot. But I think the speculation is
Islanders just tied it at 3-3.
Wow.
With 2 minutes to go.
That's quite the comeback.
JT Pasha.
Good.
Yeah.
Of course. Playoff Pasha was there.
Yeah.
Seth Jarvis is another one, but I don't know how much sense that makes for Toronto. It'd be a good move if they're just trying to stockpile in every position possible. You mentioned Caden Gooley, and the other one was Braden Schneider. This is where Leafs fans are definitely split, and this is where they're going to pick is definitely going to lead to some people being pretty upset. With that 15th overall pick, Braden Schneider is not the best defenseman available, but he's the most NHL-ready defenseman available. He's the one who's probably the best presence. He's a right-handed shot. I thought he was bigger, but he has decent size. He can hit. I think his ceiling is second pair. So we'll see who they pick, but you caught my eye when you said Lundell there because I'm going to be really upset if he falls to Toronto. Because, he can step in probably in 3 years and he can be their 3C before Tavares is gone because Tavares is up in 5 years and then he becomes their 2C. So the other one that I was going to mention was Helge Grön. So actually Braden Schneider, he's 6'2". He's playing in the WHL right now. Like I said, he's the presence. And if Toronto's trying to win now and get that right shot defenseman who is a presence, who is a big body, who is a good defensively, he'd be their guy. Another guy is Helge Grön, who I definitely think they should take a look at. Sorry, 1 second. I'm going to pull up his. I don't know how tall he is. Who's also another right shot defenseman. It also depends if Toronto's going to draft for BPA, if they're going to draft positionally. it really depends. So yeah, Helge Grans, he's 6'3". He shoots right. He's another defenseman who was in that range from 20 to 30. So those are players that Leafs fans should be looking at. I think they're going to draft positionally. I definitely think it's going to be a defenseman. But it depends if you're a Leafs fan. If you want them to get the best player available, that'd be someone like Seth Jarvis or Jack Quinn or Dylan Holloway. But it's up to Leafs fans if they want the defenseman right now or if they want someone who could be good in 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I was talking to Kyle Watson last night, and he had the 3 of the similar players to Rain, but he also included Mercer. Who's Mercer?
I don't know much about Dawson Mercer, if I can be completely honest. He's playing in the Q. He plays right wing and center. That wouldn't be a bad move. But I honestly think if I'm Toronto, I think you're going to see Dubas look at defenseman, or maybe they take Askarov.
Do you think he'll fall?
Askarov? Yeah. Oh yeah. I definitely think he's going to fall. I definitely think he's going to go 20 to 30 range. Could be wrong. At least 15 to 25 range. I think some of the forwards.
The Leafs could trade down then if he's going like 20 to 30.
Well,
I think he gets taken.
I think if he's taken in the top 15, it will be 15. I can't see him being taken before some of these guys. Look, this draft year is so weird because, the past couple of years we've had at least a general consensus for top 5. For me, once you go past Lafreniere and Byfield, a lot of it's going to be teams drafting based on need. And you have tons of players who are in my top 5 who I could definitely see going out of the top 10. You have players that I had around 12 who could definitely go in the top 10. Someone like Anton Lundell, who I said I had at 7, some people have at 16, right? So it's a really weird draft year, but I think some of the players here, a lot of these players can be top 6 forwards. Some of them can be really good goal scorers. And I think to take a flyer on a goalie that early is pretty risky, especially if you're Toronto. I don't think that'd be the best move. I think, you can work with serviceable tandem as a goaltending duo. And, you made such a good deal getting that 15th overall pick, or you're really going to take a flyer on a goalie who's 18, who's not going to be ready for a couple of years. That's risky, but I definitely think he's going to fall. And if he does fall, then Toronto, by all means, make that pick. But I think there are better options there at 15.
Yeah, most of the mock drafts I looked at had him going around the 11-12 range, which Edmonton, Carolina, and Minnesota all pick before them. And all 3 of those teams are in need of a goalie. Well,
okay, yeah, let me rephrase, because I think he should go 15 to 25, but I could definitely see a team reaching for him. Obviously, we saw Florida pick Spencer Knight at 14th or 13th that year. So you probably will go top 15, but I definitely think with the players in this class, a lot of whom could be top 6 forwards, a lot of whom could step in and be solid defensemen who there's a bit more certainty with their play, then I would not take, personally, if I were a scout, if I was up on the floor, I would not take Askarov until somewhere after 15th. But by then it would be a best player available type of move.
That's interesting because he's appeared to look as though he's a very, very, very good goalie, and he's done very well in the KHL. He just didn't have a very good World Juniors. And
yeah,
I don't know. I think the Leafs take a flyer on. I think they're going to need a goalie in the next couple of years, and Anderson likely won't stick around.
Joseph Woll,
Joseph Woll is your really only option.
Yeah.
And we don't really know what he's going to be.
Right.
But there's also rumors if they move, look, Anderson's pretty inconsistent as a goaltender, and I wouldn't point the finger at Anderson for their struggles. I think he's the reason he's actually sort of gotten them into the playoffs the past couple of years. Mm-hmm. I think if anything, he would need a better backup. I don't think you go with Jack Campbell as your starting goalie. I know there's talks about potentially Matt Murray or Braden Holtby going to Toronto, but I don't know if, unless they're doing it to clear up cap space. Anderson's making what, 5?
5.
6?
Yeah,
5 flat, I think.
Yeah, and if you're doing it to clear space, then sure, but I think Anderson is the one constant that you keep. And if I'm Toronto, I'm keeping Anderson, and I'm trying to find a cheaper backup. Maybe Marc-Andre Fleury wants to play a backup role. Who knows? Maybe Holtby wants to play a backup role.
They do have Jack Campbell, and he's paid $1.625 for the next, 2 years. So he'll be UFA the year after Anderson expires, which is next summer. If it ends in the summer, we don't really know when the next season's going to end. Mm-hmm. But he's 30 years old. He's going to want a lot of money. I think the Leafs let Anderson go. Personally, I don't think they re-sign him. I think they might trade him this offseason and try to sign someone like a Thomas Greiss. I think that might make some sense and do like a 1-2 with him and Jack Campbell. But I don't know. I think Askarov is a good option for them. He's very highly touted, and I've seen people compare him to Carey Price.
Yeah, I've seen that comparison as well.
Wow, okay.
Well, that, like, goalies are so weird. Like, you look at
That's true.
There are mid-round goalies that end up doing well. Like Montreal's backup right now, Caden Primo. He was a 7th-round pick, and he's expected to be the future of Montreal's goaltending. You have Spencer Knight, who was taken 13th. Price was taken 5th overall. I remember that pick was criticized a lot because Kopitar was on the board there. So it's definitely weird. And I think if you're Toronto and you can afford to take a risk, maybe you move up. Maybe if he's not there if he's there after 15th, maybe you move some other picks and potentially grab him. But it's weird. I don't know. The draft's fun because anything can happen, and players fall, and then there's always trades, and teams move a couple 2nd or 3rd round picks to get into maybe the top 20 and stuff like that, along with a roster player. Like it's a lot of fun, and I think this is the beginning for Toronto, and I think sort of a wake up call because I know non-Toronto fans have been saying that this team isn't as good as everyone else is saying, and they need help on defense, they need help on goaltending, they need a bit more veteran presence, they need to play a bit more polished game that isn't I guess as lackadaisical offensively, but good for the Leafs. Pains me to say it, but good for the Leafs.
So if you had to pick, who do you have going to the Leafs and who do you have going to Montreal?
On draft day?
Yeah.
Who do I think they're going to pick, or who do I want them to pick?
Who do you think they're going to pick?
I think that the Maple Leafs are going to take a right defenseman, either Helge Grans out of the SHL. He's a right shot defenseman, 6'3", or they'll take Braden Schneider. I think if they're who they should take, I think you have to look at someone like Seth Jarvis, a right winger. He's BPA, and if he's there at 15, that'd be an unbelievable steal. Lundell would be a steal. If Lundell or Jarvis are there and you don't take them, if you're Toronto or Montreal, you're pretty stupid. But I think they're going to go with Schneider or Helge Grans, the two right shot defensemen.
And who do you think Montreal?
There is a Russian left winger, Rodion. I don't know how to say his name. Amirov.
That is who actually Kyle Watson had the Leafs taking.
That'd be a fantastic pick for the Leafs, and that seems like a Dubas kind of pick. Yeah, silky smooth left winger. Like, he's not like a pure goal scorer, but he's an excellent playmaker. And for Montreal, they have Alexander Romanov coming in, and he's the only Russian player they have. And we've seen before other teams, not just Montreal, when they're Russian players, they try to surround them with other Russian players. Because obviously it's a big move going from Russia to them. But if I'm Montreal, I want Jarvis or Amirov.
Mm-hmm. All right. And I think that's everything hockey.
Awesome.
So that leaves our final segment of the show, the hot takes. Who wants to go first?
I don't know how hot take. I'm trying to think.
I can go first.
So not Patrick. We'll go with Mr. Aiden.
All right. I'll go with baseball. We didn't touch on it too much, but I'll go back to baseball. Yeah. August 31st, trade deadline. It's pretty big in the MLB. I have JD Martinez getting traded from the Boston Red Sox, and he will go to your Toronto Blue Jays. The Blue Jays will get JD Martinez, former 40 home run hitter. I think they're going to get him.
What position does he play again?
He can play outfield. He can play first base. He can play DH. I think he's very versatile. He's a power bat. He's going to make their offense even better than it already is. And I don't think the Jays will have to give up too much because he is a free agent as well.
All right. I guess that's quite the hot take. I don't know because I don't follow baseball. But Patrick, do you have one or do you like me to go first?
I don't know. I mean, like, I had my price overpaid and a little bit overrated take. I don't know if that's a hot take. I know Habs fans don't like it, but if I were to think of a hot take, I'm just thinking of hockey. But Quinton Byfield should go first overall. I'll say it. There we go. That's
a hot take.
I genuinely believe that as well, and I can.
Interesting.
Really?
When we had Kennedy on, she said Lafreniere was. He had to go first overall.
And I think she said Byfield's like not even like top 5. or something like that. Yeah.
That's a hot take. That's a hotter take. Was that her take? Was that a hot? Oh my god.
It wasn't her hot. Her hot take was Vancouver makes it to the Stanley Cup final. That's a hot take as well.
Well.
Yeah, she was pretty hot. She had like some hot takes that episode. It was.
Yeah.
Well, no, because I genuinely believe that. I genuinely think that Byfield should go first overall.
Interesting. Why do you think that?
If you look here, give me a second because I have a little thing right now.
Like Byfield didn't even play like for Canada at all.
Yeah, but like I understand that argument, and I think that's fair.
And Lafreniere is like a stud.
He is. Mm-hmm. I just think every single year, there is always a center who is undervalued, and they always take the best winger at the time. You saw it. You had Landeskog, Huberdeau, and Strome, who were all taken above Scheifele. You had Dal Cole, Virtanen, and Ehlers all taken before Matt Barzal. Vrana, Fleury, and Honka, who were all taken before Larkin. Barzal came to 15th. I just think every single year people tend to undervalue the center. Happened with Elias Pettersson, who was obviously, without a doubt, the best player in that draft class. And I just think every single year players look at the centerman, and I would use the exact same argument for Anton Lundell, who I was talking about earlier, who I think is going to be like a very solid defensive second-line center. Watching Byfield play, I'm going to see if I can pull up the stats here. I don't want dead air. Watching Byfield play literally reminds me of Evgeny Malkin. And I think if he falls out of the top 2 or out of the top 3, he will be in 5 years. Look, he's not the best right now. By far. He's definitely not the best. Lafreniere is the best player of this draft class right now. And he will step into the league and he will get 70 points and he will have 100-point seasons. And he will be unreal. That's. I'm not saying that Byfield is better. But I think when you look at every single draft year, you look at the centers that were undervalued at the time, they tend to develop later. They tended to get bigger and stronger. Look at Alexander Barkov's development, for example. That took a while. Mm-hmm. And I think you're going to see in 5 to 6 years, Quinton Byfield is going to be the next Evgeny Malkin, and people are going to be like, holy crap, I can't believe we missed out on him. And I can find the stats. Sorry, it's taken me a long time. It's in one of my bookmarked tweets. And the problem, this is why comparing players is so tricky. And I hate doing it because if someone says, oh, I like player A better than player B, they assume you're saying, oh, so you're saying player B sucks? And it's like, it's none of that. And I understand Lafreniere's hype and all that stuff. There we go. Here it is. Quinton Byfield, through 45 games played, had 32 goals, 82 points, 1.82 points per game. Alexis Lafreniere, through 61 games played, had 37 goals. So through an extra, 12 games, there was only a 5-goal difference. Their points were similar. Their points per game were similar. Byfield actually had more points per game and almost more points despite playing fewer games in the CHL. So, yeah, I guess that's my hot take. It just kind of came to me. Because to me, I don't think it's a hot take. I know people don't like it, but I think that should be talked about because I think he's going to fall out of the top 3. And whoever gets him is going to win the draft.
That's an even hotter take, is that it fall out of the top 3 because I thought it was a consensus number 2.
Well, there's Stützle, right? And everyone seems to love Stützle, who I think is the most overrated player in the draft. If we can talk about that.
Another hot take.
Yeah,
Another hot take.
I didn't have any. Now I have all of them. I think the no, he's good. And I think for me, he's at 4. But the Patrick Kane comparisons are a bit much for me. That's the thing. That's where I draw the line. It's like, hey, you're really calling him Patrick Kane? Like, you got to relax, you know? But yeah, I would say Byfield should go first overall. And I think if you're the New York Rangers, look, you have decent depth on the wings. You have Zibanejad, but if you want to get a tandem and you want centers there, Byfield would make sense. I don't think they're going to do it, and I definitely think they're going to go Lafreniere, but Byfield would make sense in my opinion.
I guess you'll get more into this on your new podcast as well.
Yes, of course. This is definitely something. Sorry for that long-winded hot take.
Don't worry about it. That's even better. My final hot take: the Toronto Maple Leafs and Montreal Canadiens will be trade partners this summer. Or do we call it summer? Off-season. Not summer. Off-season. Fall. What do we call it? What are we calling it?
Off-season.
It's still an off-season.
All right. So I think the Montreal Canadiens and Toronto Maple Leafs will be trade partners this off-season. But with that, thank you for listening. Patrick, thank you for taking the time out of
course, my
your
pleasure.
day to record this probably 3-hour-long podcast.
My pleasure, guys. Thanks so much.
Almost
for
4
having me.
hours. Yeah.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.
We really appreciate you coming on, and this has been a great discussion. We'll link all of his stuff down below in the comment or the description of this YouTube video. I don't think we can link it on the Spotify stuff, although nobody listens to the Spotify, so that's perfectly okay.
That's how I found the episode. That's why I was listening. I didn't know you guys put it on YouTube. I listened to the episode with Matt and Kyle on Spotify. So.
Oh, okay. There you go.
You're one listener.
If you're listening on Spotify, thank you. Rate our podcast, please. We'd love to hear what you have to say. We always want to get better. We want the feedback. And that's the goal of this podcast, is to bring this entire sport media community together and give everybody a platform to tell their stories. So next week, we probably won't be back with an episode. It might be the week after that, because I might be having my wisdom teeth out, and that will make speaking impossible.
And I'm going to a cottage, so
Aiden is also going to a cottage. Yeah. So we will see. But yeah, good luck for people starting school. Yeah. Thank you for listening. If you listen this long, you're legendary. We will see you in 2 weeks. But until then, goodbye.